Good morning, it's 7 o'clock. Welcome to Mornings with Ridge and Frost.
With Sophie and Wilf, good morning from me as well. It is Davos Day, so lots of international news around.
Donald Trump is on the way to Davos for the World Economic Forum after delivering another threat about his ambition to take Greenland last night.
World leaders await him. It's a critical moment for the future of global alliances, but Keir Starmer won't be there.
Also today, a finger prick blood test could be an early warning for children with type 1 diabetes.
And with so much debate over whether social media should be banned for under-16s, we've been asking teenagers in Australia whether their ban is working 6 weeks on.
Good morning, welcome to the programme. Some breaking news on inflation has just come out from the Office for National Statistics, and it's a little bit hotter than expected, a little bit higher than expected. So CPI has come in at 3.4%. The expectation was for 3.3%. Last month was 3.2%. These are the figures for December. All of that seems pretty close to what was expected, but just to mention the trend, rewind the clock a little bit, Sophie. So August and September, inflation was 3.8. It fell in October to 3.6. It fell in November to 3.2. People hoped, therefore, that it was continuing that trend. It has now just ticked back up again to 3.4. It was expected to tick up just this month a little bit to 3.3. It's ticked up a little bit more than that to 3.4. Still some way from that recent peak in August and September of 3.8. People still expect that to have been the peak of recent times. They're not expecting it to get back up to that level, but it's a little bit higher than people expected. Core came in at 3.2%. That's when you strip out volatile food and energy. That was a little bit better than expected. The forecast there was 3.3%. And services came in at 4.5%, which was where it was expected. Now, coming into this, we weren't expecting a rate cut at the next meeting, which is in February. Of course, we recently had a cut to 3.75%, which is where the Bank of England rate sits currently. Ahead of this, we were expecting probably 2, possibly 3 cuts this year without having one. This next meeting, not having one until April. This will make it certain that we won't have a cut next month when we have the February meeting, because inflation's come in a little bit higher than expected.
So what's the kind of sweet spot for inflation then?
The sweet spot is low and stable inflation.
So like
you
2%.
want 2% and you want it consistent.
So it's
in pure economic terms.
So it's a bit high. It is a bit high. I think, so if people are feeling like things are still expensive, they've got a reason to.
Yes, definitely. But the target is 2%. So forget what is ideal if you read an economic textbook. Our target is 2% plus or minus 1% with a bit of a swing factor, and we're above that. We're in the threes. It doesn't feel that high because we had 11% a few years ago, but it's not what you want long term. I think the key is as long as it's still coming down, and 1 month doesn't make a trend. The trend since August has been that it's coming down from 3.8 to 3.4 today. It's just this last month, it's just ticked up a bit. So next month after, you're really going to want to make sure it's just a one-off month ticking up, not going on. But yeah, 3.4%. The expectation was 3.3, and last month was 3.2. So something to keep an eye on.
Let's talk Donald Trump, shall we? He's on his way to Davos, where he's going to be joining world leaders at the World Economic Forum. Look, it's a critical moment for the future of the transatlantic alliance. And last night, Donald Trump spent almost 2 hours speaking to journalists about his accomplishments, mainly, but he also talked about Greenland, where he said the world was going to find out what would happen. He's going to be giving a speech later today.
But the mood in Davos is grave. And Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney said yesterday, we're in the midst of a rupture, not a transition. So the stakes for the next couple of days could not really be much higher.
So let's let you know what's going on. Donald Trump going to be landing in Switzerland a bit later than expected, actually. And this is because Air Force One, his big presidential plane, was actually turned around after 40 minutes in the air. It was because of a minor electrical fault. But it is potentially pushing those timelines back a bit, because he had to get on a new plane and leave for a second time.
So the new plane now is called Air Force One. of course. That's the call sign of whichever plane the president is on. As opposed
so it's not an actual plane, it's just a name for
wherever the president
goes.
is Air Force One.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. Haven't you seen that great Harrison Ford movie?
No, I'm terrible at movies.
Called Air Force One, and we're being told to move on.
Yeah.
I'm not allowed to do movie trivia.
It's too serious, the news.
Almost when someone tells me to move on, it makes me want to double down and stick with it. But I won't.
A rebel.
I won't.
A rebel.
Now, before leaving Washington, the president was asked about the state of his relationship with the European leaders.
How would you characterize your relationship with Emmanuel Macron and Keir Starmer right now? And have you spoken to them since your Truth Social post last
No, I
night?
haven't, but I think I get along very well with them. I mean, they always treat me well. They get a little bit rough when they're, when I'm not around. But when I'm around, they treat me very nicely. And, I like both of them. They're both liberal. They've got to straighten out their countries. You can't, London is having a lot of problems. And if you look at Paris, got a lot of problems.
How far are you willing to go to acquire Greenland?
You'll find out.
That was an extraordinary press conference last night from President Trump. Went on for a couple of hours. As we said, a grave vibe awaits him in Davos. Here's Paul Kelso with a summary of a lot of high-profile speeches yesterday.
It says World Economic Forum on the signs and on the delegates' badges here in Davos, but this week has really been all about one man and one country. Donald Trump's designs on Greenland and willingness to unleash economic war and share private messages from fellow presidents to get it has set the agenda and the tone of a united response from European and G7 leaders.
Arctic security can only be achieved together. And this is why the proposed additional tariffs are a mistake, especially between long-standing allies.
Here in the epicenter of this continent, we do believe that we need more growth, we need more stability in this world. But we do prefer respect to bullies, we do prefer science to plotism, and we do prefer rule of law to brutality.
We stand firmly with Greenland and Denmark and fully support their unique right to determine Greenland's future.
European leadership has been mocked by the American delegation to Davos. The EU president says they will not be bullied, but they are listening.
If this change is permanent, then Europe must change permanently too. It is time to seize this opportunity and build a new independent Europe.
Not every American here shares Trump's worldview. California's Democrat governor using language some wish Europeans would channel.
I can't take this complicity. People rolling over. I should have brought a bunch of knee pads for all the world leaders. I mean, handing out crowns and this is pathetic.
Europeans think this is diplomacy and this will ultimately
this is
work.
Diplomacy with Donald Trump? He's a T-Rex. You mate with him or he devours you. One or the other.
From the administration officials already here, no apologies.
The Trump administration and myself, we are here to make a very clear point. Globalization has failed the West and the United States of America. It's a failed policy. It is what the WEF has stood for, which is export, offshore, far shore, find the cheapest labor in the world, and the world is a better place for it. The fact is, it has left America behind. It has left the American workers behind.
The US has brought its biggest ever delegation to Davos this year, and there's a reason for that. Even before Greenland became the centre of attention, this argument about tariffs and trade is a fight America wants to have. I've just come from a briefing with its trade representative, Jameson Greer, and he was crystal clear. The terms of trade have been unfair to America for decades, that it's totally legitimate for Donald Trump to use tariffs to try and take over territory. And no one, not even Europe, not even the UK, can take access to American markets for granted.
If there is to be a de-escalation in Davos, a gentle way down the mountain President Trump has led everyone up, it will come from the president in person. Paul Kelso, Sky News in Davos.
Well, alongside Paul, Yalda is there for us and joins us now. Yalda, very good morning to you. Those speeches yesterday were a significant warm-up act, I would say, for the president today. There was striking points made by lots of people. Perhaps Mark Carney was the most striking. And I guess we wait to see exactly where the rest of Europe and the UK in particular comes out. Do they join him in a sort of, is it fair to say, defiant tone against President Trump?
Yeah, Wilf, I mean, hasn't the last 24 hours been astonishing? You know, and you know all too well, having come to this conference in the past, I mean, Davos is essentially the biggest networking event on the planet. It's where the global elite come. And frankly, Donald Trump and his populist administration enjoy coming here. This will be his third Davos. Last year, he beamed here to all the delegates via a webcam a couple of days after he was inaugurated and promised that he would be here. And he is arriving. He is going to be late, as you say, because of those technical issues with his aircraft. And European leaders are holding their breath. Donald Trump, in that astonishing press conference, that impromptu press conference, the sort of press conference he holds before he leaves for a trip, made some striking remarks, and he doubled down on his ambition to acquire Greenland. And yesterday, we did hear Mark Carney, the Prime Minister of Canada, use quite tough words. He said that the world order, the sort of world order as we've known it, is finished, and we shouldn't pretend like it still exists. Emmanuel Macron sent a very similar message. He said that, you know, we don't appreciate bullying. So they are not necessarily using Donald Trump's name, but they're sending very direct messages to him. But Wilf, the question is, will Europe stand firm? Will they remain defiant? Or will they find themselves in a position where they frankly have to strike some kind of deal with Donald Trump? You know, this conference this year was supposed to focus on a deal over Ukraine, offering security guarantees, offering an aid package to Ukraine. That is now on hold. The United States didn't send a representative on Monday to meetings here with the rest of Europe to discuss plans for Ukraine. Volodymyr Zelensky was a keynote speaker here last year, and now there are questions being asked about the future of NATO and how dangerous this moment is, not just for Europe, not just for the Western alliance, but for the future of NATO. And certainly that is music to the ears of the Chinese, the Russians, who are not really having to do much, but are being gifted this tension, this wedge that has been created between the United States and Europe, not because Europe has wanted it, but frankly because Donald Trump is saying to the global elites who have gathered here, you know, America first doesn't necessarily mean America alone, but it certainly means that perhaps the Western world is now alone.
Yeah, the absolutely fascinating preview. This is going to be a crazy day. So great to have you there for it. And as you're pointed to, world affairs as opposed to just economic affairs is going to take centre stage. Yada's there with a huge day ahead in Davos for us.
Yeah, an awful lot going on in the international stage. There is a pretty big announcement back here in the UK as well, though, because the government is finally unveiling its long-awaited Warm Homes plan. It basically means families are going to be eligible to get thousands of pounds worth of kind of green tech, like solar panels or heat pumps, that kind of thing.
The aim is to provide £15 billion to overhaul households across the UK in the next 5 years. Our political correspondent Alex Rogers is here with the details of this. Alex, what's being announced?
So I think this is the government really trying to get back on the foot with their domestic agenda, been totally blown off course by global events. Some of the things that you mentioned there, £15 billion, that's a lot of money to put behind this and to help families who are in fuel poverty. I think it's over 2 million families who are struggling with this. I think another interesting element to it is really helping renters as well by boosting the standards that landlords have to adhere to. We know that Labour are trying to make life easier for renters. So again, just trying to, I think, ease the difficulty that people are struggling with the cost of living crisis.
It's difficult kind of politically for the government, isn't it, I guess? You know, you see the beginning of this year was supposed to be all about the domestic agenda, all about the cost of living. This kind of story, for example, and yet here we have, Donald Trump almost declaring war on NATO. I mean, they're very split.
Yeah, and I think they will be really pushing this hard today because they know that they can't really win the election without sorting this. This is the stuff that actually really matters to people. And I think another interesting element is that the kind of passion project of net zero has been kind of dumbed down. Not dumbed down, but kind of it's losing. Ed Miliband has been losing that battle. Reform and the Tories they've kind of talked down net zero. So I think this is an example of Ed Miliband trying to get back on the front foot there.
Great stuff, thank you. Now, all children in the UK could be screened for type 1 diabetes using a finger prick test following a landmark study.
So the idea is to stop children basically crash landing into diagnosis and try and spot the disease before people get symptoms in the first place.
The two types of diabetes are quite different. Type 1 means the body cannot produce insulin because it attacks the cells in the pancreas. They don't really know what causes it, but family history can slightly increase the risk.
And sticking with type 1 diabetes, it can't be prevented or cured. People normally treat it by taking insulin for life, and it also does require, a healthy lifestyle and medical supervision as well.
Whereas type 2 diabetes happens when the body is unable to make enough insulin. There are multiple risk factors that can cause type 2, but it includes genetics, age and obesity.
Type 1 can't be prevented, but type 2 is pretty different here because it is generally preventable if you adopt a healthy lifestyle. And type 2 diabetes may also require insulin support, but it can be managed through changing habits as well.
Let's bring in Sadia, who are able to tell us a little bit more about what's come out in this study and how it relates to these different types.
So the idea was to check whether finger prick blood testing children would be an effective screening tool. And the study says it is. And the way it checks it is the finger prick blood test to see if there are markers which previously have shown up for people that end up with type 1 diabetes. Right now, experts say too many children are being sort of crash landing, as you say, into this diagnosis, realising that they have type 1 diabetes when they're already in a medical emergency. The study was done by the University of Birmingham. It's being called a landmark study. It was done on children between the ages of 3 and 13. 17,000 tests were carried out and more than 200 children were found to have been at risk. So next up is phase 2, which will see the rollout of screening clinics in some areas, specifically for children. And the idea is to help them figure out if they are at risk of type 1 diabetes before they have to be reliant on insulin, to sort of stretch that time out so that they can be better supported by their parents and NHS staff and get the treatment that they need.
Sadia, great stuff. Thank you so much.
Well, we're just talking about the government's plan on warm homes, a big kind of energy strategy. We've got it today, and I'm pleased to say we've got the guy who is leading it in the studio as well, Ed Miliband, the Energy Security Net Zero Secretary. Thank you very much for being with us.
Good to be here.
So talk to us about the warm homes plan. What's the idea?
Well, the biggest issue facing the country is the cost of living crisis, and we're proud that we're taking £150 of costs off energy bills this coming April. But we also know that upgrading homes is absolutely key to getting bills down. And that's what this plan is about. It's the biggest public investment we've ever seen in upgrading homes. And it's a whole range of measures. It's upgrading standards for private renters. It's investing in social housing to cut fuel poverty. And it's cutting the costs for people of solar panels, heat pumps. The moral mission of the government is to tackle this affordability crisis, tackle fuel poverty, and that's what this plan's all about.
On the heat pumps, because this is quite a big part of it, isn't it? Electricity costs are quite high, right? Is it guaranteed that heat pump will actually save you money?
All of the evidence that we've got is that because the costs of heat pumps have come down, and because we've cut the cost of electricity in the budget, because the Chancellor took action to cut the cost of electricity as part of that £150, with the right tariff, you can get it's cheaper to run a heat pump than a boiler. And we want to
put... It's not a guarantee, is it? Because there's an upfront cost, and obviously the price of electricity is...
Well, there's two aspects to this. There's running the heat pump, and you can now save money compared to running a boiler, and then there's the upfront cost. Now, what's good is because, as I say, the costs are coming down, it's now becoming cost competitive with a boiler. And the £7,500 grant, which is what we're offering, makes that possible. And look, this is all about,
but
Sophie...
you can't guarantee it, can you?
I'm not giving I'm not giving a guarantee, but I think all of the evidence is from suppliers and others is that it can cut the costs. And the point about this is that we want this to be in the reach not just of the wealthiest in society, but everyone. And why shouldn't people have access to the cheaper kit, to the thing that's cheaper to run?
The other thing I was going to say is, because you obviously talk about affordability and the £150 off bills, but I'm right in saying that a lot of that is because it's basically been shifted to general taxation, right? I mean, you're talking about £15 billion of investment as well. So people are still going to have to pay for it. I mean, I know there is an argument that it is fairer because those who can, with broader shoulders can pay more, but it's not like it's all for free, I guess.
Well, there are trade-offs, but we've made a decision to raise taxes on the wealthy and indeed on business to help ordinary families, and we think that's the right decision for the country. Look, the whole purpose of this government is to stand up for ordinary families. And this cost of living crisis, Sophie, it's not just something that arose when Russia invaded Ukraine and bills went through the roof. It's a 15-year issue that families have faced. I think that's what so many families feel. And so we are proud of taking action, including through taxation.
So do we know, that the £150 off bills, which is the figure that you talk about it a lot, how much would people save if you take into account how much the average person will be paying in increased taxes towards this?
Well, I don't think you can make an average person, because we've raised taxes on the wealthy in order to cut bills for people.
I guess what I'm trying to say is, you're saying that someone's saving £150 off their energy bill, but if they're paying for it just in a different way,
but that's not
tax,
that's not what we're doing. Look, for example, we've done a tax on expensive properties. We've got the windfall tax in place. We've made differences. We've raised capital gains tax. Well, I don't agree with your point, no, because we've made a decision that the fair thing to do is to raise taxes on the wealthy, which is what we've done, to cut bills for everybody. And that's a choice of government. I mean, that's what fair taxation is all about.
I understand the point on that totally, but I guess I'm just trying to say it's not just £150 that's just coming from nowhere. People are still paying for it through taxation.
Well, some people, I think the point is that some people are paying for it, and we've made a decision that the fair and right thing to do is to make the change we did.
Donald Trump's in Davos today. Why isn't the PM there?
Oh, well, the PM's got all kinds of other things that he's doing.
What is it that he's doing that means he can't be in Davos?
Well, I think, look, let's go to the bigger picture. I'm not going to get into his diary, but the bigger picture here is that the Prime Minister is, I think, navigating a really difficult international situation with great skill and in our national interest. We're a year on from Donald Trump having been inaugurated. I know some people will want to say, why hasn't the Prime Minister been matching Donald Trump tweet for tweet, all of that? I honestly say to you, Sophie, we'd be in a much worse position as a country if some of what people had called for Keir Starmer to do on this, he's shown calm leadership, which got us the first trade deal with the US, which got us the lowest tariff. Now, this is a very challenging situation, and we've got a principle, which is we seek common ground with Donald Trump, but where we disagree, we say so, and that's what he said on Greenland. But I think Keir Starmer's leadership is absolutely right on this, and I think at this stage it's about de-escalation and finding a way through this tricky situation.
I've just been told in my ear, and I hate spraying these things on you, that Reuters reporting the PM's going to China next week. We are, of course, expecting, that Chinese trip. Were you comfortable with the idea that this embassy has been granted in London?
Absolutely. Look, and I think what's clear is that we had advice from the security services. We've got the very respected cross-party Intelligence and Security Committee, which said it was content with the decision. We engage with China. We challenge China where necessary. If you take my area of climate change, for example, there's no solution to the climate crisis without working with China. But we disagree with China profoundly on a number of issues, and we say so, and we challenge them.
Now, there are reports in the Mail on Sunday that you're going to be backing Andy Burnham's bid to be the next leader on the understanding you'll be Chancellor if he wins. I mean, I know you're going to tell me that this is nonsense, but I'm just going to give you the opportunity to do that.
It's absolute copper-bottom nonsense. I've had no such conversations. It's absolute balderdash, 100% wrong. I did see Andy Burnham on Monday. I saw him with the other mayors, and we're talking about the Warm Homes Plan.
Did you mention this story in the Mail on Sunday?
I didn't.
Did you have a laugh about it?
I didn't. I didn't. I was talking with all the mayors about how we're going to work with them to help cut people's bills, which is actually what this government is all about and what our announcement is all about.
It feels a little bit like all the analysis, because it's kind of drawing people into you're in the Andy Burnham camp or you're in the Wes Streeting camp, and it does make me think. It always staggers me. Labour's ability to always talk about the leadership through the prism of white men. Is it time for a woman?
I'm in the Keir Starmer camp because, Keir is a very good friend of mine. I think he's shown incredible leadership. He took Labour from election disaster in 2019 to election victory in 2024. I know what motivates him, which is exactly what we've been talking about today, which is how we tackle the cost of living crisis and how we make life easier for ordinary families. And that's what he's about.
So
What's
your message to Labour MPs who might not, might be channeling up other?
I think what all of us, what the vast majority of MPs want us to do is concentrate on getting on with the job of serving the British people, not looking inwards, not navel-gazing.
OK, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Speaking to us there about the Warm Homes plan.
Lots more still to come here on Mornings. We'll be discussing Davos again shortly. Don't go anywhere.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist.
A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan had the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra Al-Baghir has this report. And this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you?
People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
Hello, the news this morning. Let's bring it to you right now. US President Donald Trump is on his way to the World Economic Forum in Davos. He's going to be addressing world leaders and also business chiefs too. And of course, it comes amid those tensions between the US and Europe over his threats over Greenland.
British homeowners will be able to access low and zero interest loans to install solar panels, heat pumps and batteries as part of the government's £15 billion Warm Homes Plan aimed at cutting energy bills.
NHS clinics are being set up for children to try and help identify type 1 diabetes before symptoms actually start happening. And this follows a landmark study that confirms the use of fingerprint blood tests to successfully screen for diabetes.
Now, with Donald Trump's latest tariff threat, leaders in the West will be wondering if it's time to pivot away from economic reliance on the US. America's nearest ally, Canada, has been the first to break ranks on that, and it comes after he had travelled to China over the weekend, Mark Carney. Let's listen to some of the framing of things yesterday.
Let me be direct. We are in the midst of a rupture, not a transition. Over the past 2 decades, a series of crises in finance, health, energy, and geopolitics have laid bare the risks of extreme global integration. But more recently, great powers have begun using economic integration as weapons. Tariffs as leverage, financial infrastructure as coercion, supply chains as vulnerabilities to be exploited. You cannot live within the lie of mutual benefit through integration when integration becomes the source of your subordination.
It's so interesting hearing Mark Carney, I guess, laying out the kind of alternative vision there and saying that actually everything's changed. You know, nostalgia is not a strategy. And as a result, the more liberal countries, I guess, or the more, you know, kind of European-looking countries need to get it together.
Yeah, and the smaller countries that have relied on rules and laws being followed to sort of fight their corner in the world. You know, and again, I mentioned it in the intro, he just got back from meeting with Xi Jinping before this. We now know that somebody else is about to go and see him. This has been, you know, rumoured for a long time. We've known it's coming. We didn't know precise dates. Reuters is reporting this morning that Keir Starmer's trip will be next week to China with a list of companies like AstraZeneca and BP and HSBC that will be accompanying him, a list of Chinese banks and companies that they'll be meeting with. And it used that phrase, dating back to Osborne and Cameron. This is according to Reuters reporting of, you know, reigniting this golden era of relations, you know, it comes hot off the Chinese mega embassy being approved yesterday, and it, you know, I raised this question with Speaker Johnson on Friday. You know, be careful what you wish for if you're pushing your allies away. They're gonna strengthen ties with other partners. And that, I think, will be the story of next week, Keir Starmer's impending trip to China. Let's talk a little bit more detail now about the mood in Davos. Joining us is Mohammed El-Erian, Allianz's Chief Economic Advisor. Mohammed, very good morning to you. Good to see you.
Thanks for having me.
Davos is always where business leaders, central bankers, finance ministers meet. I mean, this year, they're all there. There's lots to discuss about what's on their agenda. But the principals, the world leaders, are kind of grabbing all the attention.
And they are, because, as you say, Wilfred, the rules are changing. Norms are changing. Economic policies have been weaponized. And as a result, you've got 3 reactions. You've got Mark Carney saying, we have permanently changed. You have the UK feeling that somehow you can navigate and go back to a world of yesterday. And you have Europe absolutely frozen in the headlights. And it's fascinating to see that range of reactions by country.
Do you think that, I mean, it's anyone's guess, I guess, but do you think that the EU will retaliate like for like with tariffs? And will that be a good thing or a bad thing for the UK if they don't do the same thing?
So I think the UK has woken up to 2 realities. One is US tariffs are what's called the repeated game. You can reach agreement today, but it doesn't mean that you're not going to have a tariff issue tomorrow. And that's come as a real shock because they conceded a lot to the US to get an agreement, and now that agreement is being undermined by the new announcement from the US. That's the first thing they're realizing. The second thing they're realizing is that there could be non-economic reasons for tariffs to be imposed on them. So this is a huge wake-up call. I think they're going to try to stand up to the US, but ultimately there's going to be some sort of agreement. There's too much at stake for this to break down into a trade war.
how much potential is there for the UK economy to gain by deepening ties with China? Is that something that is an automatic offset to some of the problems post-Brexit or post-trade barriers going up with the US, or is it a small, long game?
It may appear as an offset, but it won't be. Because if we continue on this road, countries are going to have to make choices. And most countries don't want to make a choice. But for the UK, it's very simple. National security with the US or economic prosperity with China. And when most countries look at that equation, Australia being another one, Singapore being another one, they will opt for national security with the US. So you have a set of countries that will opt for the US. You have another set of countries in Africa that will opt for China. And we're going to be increasingly in a fragmented world if we're not careful.
In terms of what else is happening at the moment, I wanted you to just reflect on for a moment the bond yield moves we've seen so far this year. It sounds niche in Japan. Because I think it's sort of off the scale in terms of the pace of increase. Oddly, we haven't seen it really react here, maybe marginally. And I guess that's somewhat credit to Rachel Reeves in the budget late last year that it does seem, for now, relatively stable, the borrowing outlook for the UK government.
Yes, but interest rates are too high for the debt dynamics. So yes, we've stabilized. The 10 years about 4.45 now. Higher than it is elsewhere. That's a problem. It's not as vulnerable as it was before, but the UK need to continue to focus on two things. One is growth, and we need a much more coherent, comprehensive growth approach. And two is a pro-growth fiscal policy, not fiscal policy for the sake of fiscal policy, which is what it has been so far, but fiscal policy with looking at growth promotion. Because if UK productivity doesn't go up, it will be left behind. I'll give you a simple number. The US is running GDP growth at about 4%. We're flat. That's a huge difference.
What could be done in that regard? And have these arguments changed at all over the last 12 months? Why haven't they been done?
So I think there's been lots of distraction. I think the government came in July of a year and a bit ago now with a focus on growth. You remember growth, growth, growth. We have a growth mission. Then it got sidetracked by fiscal issues. The winter fuel subsidy, and there were various elements. And you get a sense that they are really trying to put together a comprehensive growth policy in place, but it's not yet comprehensive enough. The forward-looking innovation part is still missing.
What about energy costs? It's critical to economies once again in the decade ahead, as it was in past decades. How much of a hindrance is it at the moment, and how easy would it be to address?
It's certainly a hindrance. The UK and Europe pay a lot more for energy than elsewhere, so it is a hindrance. Energy is a critical input, not just for industry, but for households. There's an attempt, as we heard in the headlines, to bring it down, to encourage people to go towards energy-efficient outcomes, but it takes time.
So you don't think that there should be a significant shift in energy policy here to address the cost aspect?
I think what you need is a coherent growth policy. And the most critical element is forward-looking productivity improvements. We need to do a lot more in the adoption of AI. AI is a productivity revolution, a transformation. And if you look at adoption in the UK, it is lagging the US and China.
And could that, if it is properly adopted, properly harnessed, could it be the solution, the productivity solution that we're looking for, or is there much more that needs to be done?
It could be an important part of the solution, but you have to continue, as they are on planning, you have to continue on various elements, significant deregulations of some sectors. You need regulation of other sectors. But I think what's missing is the business community tells me all the time here, leaders, we don't know where we're going growth-wise. Mm-hmm. We don't know how comprehensive the approach is. And that's absolutely correct. I cannot stress it enough, because without that, we will have a debt issue and we will have fiscal deficit issues every single year. And it will be as if we're chasing our tails.
Mohammed, great to see you as always. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Mohammed El-Erian from Allianz Global Advisors.
Now, we've been talking an awful lot about the possibility of a ban on social media for under-16s. And yesterday we told you the government's actually launched a consultation in the UK about whether or not they should do it. Now, politicians are, of course, watching what happens in Australia very closely. They brought a similar ban in 6 weeks ago.
So we wanted to check in on whether or not it's working. Well, let's bring in our correspondent, Nicole Johnson, who joins us from Sydney. Nicole, perhaps the best bit of television we've had since we launched the show was you live the day it unfolded, speaking to some Australian kids, all of whom basically said, we don't want this ban and we're already getting around it on day one. What's the update on month one?
Well, those kids warned us. They were pretty cheeky, weren't they? They were good value. Yeah, the update is, over the last 6 weeks, as they said, kids have been finding a way around it. Now, the government is promoting this, of course, as a successful delay or ban, however you want to call it. 4.7 million kids' accounts have been closed. Hundreds of thousands of kids picked off all of their favourite apps, 10 of them, including TikTok, Snapchat. But the kids have been telling us that they have found ways around it. And they were already starting to talk about this. They're tricking the age verification. Sometimes they're holding up a photo of someone older. They're getting an older sibling or friend or even their parents. So there are plenty of ways that they still seem to be on it. And I just got off the phone with a parent and she said social media ban. What social media ban? Her 13-year-old daughter and all of her friends were still on it. But we spoke to some of these kids in both the country and the city across Australia. Take a listen to what they had to say.
The social media ban definitely affected, well, me and my friendships a little bit because, especially on Snapchat, you go from talking every day and having a reason to talk to keep up streaks and all of that, and then it gets banned and you move to messages and you don't really have a reason to chat anymore.
To be honest, my life hasn't really changed 1 month on from the ban. A lot of my friends and I have been able to regain our accounts due to facial recognition not being fully accurate.
It's failed completely.
Failed in what way? Failed to do what?
Failed to block people from using it and also failed as an idea.
I haven't really seen anybody use new social media apps. I think most people just like the apps that they have already.
I overall think that the ban is positive because kids get exposed to a lot of negative things online that can affect their mental health and body image and perception of others. And it's also quite fake, the platforms that they use.
Hearing everyone
So you
talk
can
about...
hear there, Soph and Wilf, that, it's a pretty patchy result. Here in Australia, kids have found ways around it and many of them are still on social media. But other kids have said it is the middle of school holidays and they are spending more time outside. They're more engaged with their friends and they are seeing the benefits. And parents are saying that even if the 14 and 15-year-olds are still on it because the cat's already out of the bag, that much is for sure, that it will make a difference for 8, 9, 10-year-olds, those younger kids who still don't have their phones, but when they get their phones, the parents say they'll be able to keep the kids off it.
Nicole, thank you very much indeed. Nicole there reporting on the impacts of that social media ban in Australia. Look, I'm sure it's a subject that lots of you guys have got opinions on as well. So let us know what you think. You can email mornings@sky.uk. We're going to be coming back to the story throughout the programme because over in the House of Lords here in the UK, they're going to be voting on this amendment about whether or not we should do the same over here.
Let's, in the meantime, have a look at the weather.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean All Clear Skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News weather.
It'll be mild and unsettled this week, turning colder over the weekend. It'll be windy through the rush hour with prolonged rain and some mountain snow over the northeast of Scotland, and more also in the southwest. In between, most places look fine, bar the odd mainly coastal shower. Eastern Scotland will see rain and hill snow clearing by the far north by midday, leaving most northern and central parts fine. Ireland, Wales and southern and central England, meanwhile, will see rain spreading from the southwest with brighter skies and a scattering of blustery showers following to the West Country. It'll be mild but windy with coastal gales likely in the southwest and the northeast.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News weather.
Coming up, we're going to be talking about this landmark study that could be a game changer for diagnosing children with type 1 diabetes.
you?
Good morning. Good morning.
Nice to see you.
How are you feeling? Looking forward to getting into the parliamentary chamber.
Are you any further forward to making a decision?
No, it's an important day today.
All of the claims were in line with my parliamentary duties, so I'm making that clear to you, Connor.
He was a Scot through and through.
He was a very good politician.
Alex Salmond was controversial, he was a disruptor, but above all, he was respected. Will you resign if you lose this week?
Again, I'm not planning to, of course, lose the vote of no confidence. I'm planning to win that vote of no confidence.
His face said it all.
My intention to stand down as party leader.
This is now a storm with deadly consequences. How are they feeling?
They're a bit scared at the minute.
We've been told to evacuate.
How are you feeling?
Devastated.
Hundreds of homes were wiped out by flooding. I'm Connor Gillis, Sky's Scotland correspondent.
It was probably the darkest time in my life.
Scott is 5 years sober after a cocaine addiction left him close to death. Scotland has a shameful record, worse than England, the worst in Europe. Why not just say you failed? Because then you might get more respect from families who've lost loved ones. This is where one of the UK's most prolific rapists thought he'd got away with murder. Sky News can reveal that former sex workers had told police he was sexually violent.
My Emma.
Free wherever you get your news. It's over, isn't it? The Americans say he is Rossi, a fraudster. This has been one of the most bizarre cases ever heard in a courtroom in this country. A dangerous murderer. Do you think you'll ever be able to forgive Andrew Ennis after this?
She said she can forgive him, but as long as he's behind bars.
By doing the right thing, it's destroyed your life.
They terrorised me. They intimidated me. I'm so grateful.
Sky News, the full story first.
People that pod together, they have a little hive brain going on.
They've not had a good week.
I've had a good week.
There's a teaser there, a teaser.
OK, nothing to see here, drama over, full stop. Anyway, we'll get to that. She will be mortified.
So she's the first female chancellor. I popped upstairs, made myself a cheese sandwich, and now I'm with you.
Annalise has come dressed in the magenta of electoral dysfunction. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist? I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up. Being a Sky News journalist. Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us?
Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office.
Here it is. First off, just the scale of what we're looking at.
Our data shows it's been happening. Question is why it hasn't been stopped.
Welcome back. Well, we were talking earlier in the show about a huge study looking at screening children for diabetes and how it could help identify kids with the disease before it reaches crisis point.
Now, this was a really, really interesting change, and we wanted to dig into it a bit more, hear the experience of a parent who's been through that early diagnosis, because, look, I mean, you can't really imagine something as frightening, overwhelming to receive it for your child. Tanya Upjohn's daughter, Sophia, was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when she was only 3 years old. She joins us online, and we're also joined in the studio by the Head of Research and Impact Communications at Diabetes UK, Dr. Lucy Chambers.
Very good morning to you both. Can't wait, Tanya, to get into your specific experience of this. But firstly, Lucy, if I could just come to you, if you could just explain to us what we're talking about here, specifically the type of diabetes and what's been developed with this new test.
Sure. So type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune condition. That means that the immune system turns on the pancreas and kills off the cells that produce insulin. And we all need insulin to stay alive. So someone who develops type 1 diabetes will need to be on insulin for life through injections or a pump, and they'll need to be checking their blood sugar levels. So it's a really serious condition that requires a lot of management. So in the UK, around about 4,000 children are diagnosed with type 1 diabetes each year. And at the moment when they're diagnosed, the kind of usual story we hear from parents is that symptoms come on really quickly, the child becomes very ill, there's usually a dash to the GP surgery or the hospital, and they get the diagnosis there and then they have to move immediately onto insulin. We also know from looking at the data that about 25% of these children are so ill at that point that they've developed something called diabetic ketoacidosis, DKA, which is a potentially fatal condition. So that's not how we want people to be diagnosed, and this is what screening is all about. We now have the ability to screen children and look for markers in their blood that show us that they're on the journey to type 1 diabetes, that they are very likely to develop in the future. And if we can find those children, we can intervene early, we can make sure they don't end up with a medical emergency, and we can also, which is really exciting, connect them, give them access to new drugs that are coming through that can actually hold off the condition for a certain amount of time.
Let's bring in Tanya at this point, shall we? So your daughter, Sophia, I think she's 8 now, is that right?
Yep, she's 8 now. And like you said, she was 3 when she was diagnosed. It was 9 days before her 4th birthday. And our story was very similar. A dash to the GP surgery, straight to hospital. Thankfully, Sophia wasn't on DKA. So it wasn't, you know, that initial really frightening experience, but it was very overwhelming with... I didn't understand it. To be honest, I thought type 1 diabetes was genetic or through diet. So myself and my husband were completely overwhelmed, and there was the initial guilt. Was there something we could have done to prevent it? And then it goes on to, what does this mean for Sophia? What does it mean for her now? What does it mean for her in 3 years? What does it mean for her in 10 years? And then you are very overwhelmed by how to manage it. It's not just 1 injection a day. It's not just a connection to a pump and everything's solved. There's carb counting. There's waiting time for food. There's learning how to inject your child right there and then. You've had no practice. You're thrown in at the deep end. There's the finger pricking. There's the lack of sleep in the initial stages is really tough. Because it's almost like having a newborn baby because you don't know how to look after your child. Which as a parent is very frightening at the time. Obviously now it's a different story. We're 4.5 years down the line, and I wouldn't say we know what we're doing or pros, because every day with diabetes, you know, throws up new challenges, but we understand it. Sophia understands it. Where she was only 3, it was hard for her to understand. You know, when everyone else around you can eat when they want, and you're having to wait 15 minutes or perhaps don't have that extra chocolate that everyone else can just go and have and not think about. It was a lot for her to get her head around. And also, she had a sibling, and, you know, he just seen mummy and daddy straight in hospital with his sister. We had, you know, he was worried. So it affects the whole family. And we were very fortunate that we had a great hospital team who provided training and were amazing. But she was diagnosed on a Monday and we were out on a Thursday, and, you know, we had to do everything and then try and get her back to school. And we were very lucky again. The school were amazing, but it was every person you interact with has to also learn. And I think it happens very quick and it's very overwhelming for a lot of people involved.
It sounds so overwhelming. And as you say, also the kind of, I guess the lack of understanding for many people, for so many of us, about the differences between the 2 different kinds of diabetes as well. I think we can have a look at a picture of Sophia as well. 8 years old now, obviously diagnosed when she was only 3 years old. There's Sophia. I mean, what a gorgeous girl, I have to say. Absolutely stunning. And I guess not the kind of person you would associate a child like that with having diabetes.
Lucy, in terms of this new test, clearly a lot of Tanya's experience and, more importantly, Sophia's experience wouldn't have changed other than they would have been informed about this a lot earlier and been more prepared. Is that fair or not?
Yeah, so the screening study, the ELSA study, is set up to find families like Tanya and Sophia before the child has developed any symptoms. They're still very well, but we know they are nearly 100% likely to develop type 1 diabetes through this finger prick test, and we can look for markers in the blood. And what that allows us to do is educate families. So Tanya would have had psychological support, she would have had information about how type 1 is managed, the whole family would have been supported, and then Sophia would have been monitored so she wouldn't have ended up in that really critical ill state at diagnosis. And more than that, we're now getting to the point where we've got immunotherapy drugs coming through, and some children have been given these drugs, and what it does is it delays the need for insulin therapy. So it can push it back by 2-3 more years. So it gives children more of their childhood without relentless blood sugar checks, insulin therapy, and all of those.
And if you're a 3 or 4-year-old, I mean, that could be a huge deal, I guess, couldn't it? Like you say.
Tanya and Lucy, thank you both so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. And our thanks to Sophia as well. Lovely photo we had there. Thank you.
Yeah, it really does feel like it could be a game changer.
Let's touch on, this is going to be a juicy press conference.
Oh, this is one to watch.
We're obviously focused on Donald Trump in Davos and the rest of it, but at 10 a.m, Michael O'Leary, who you might remember, the CEO of Ryanair, is holding a press conference to respond to Elon Musk. They've had this big spat on X, on Twitter, in the last couple of weeks.
I mean, I don't think you could... And I think they probably wouldn't mind me saying this either. You can imagine two people who kind of represent the kind of big man, the strong man, macho culture that we're seeing across the globe. It's Elon Musk versus Michael O'Leary. This all started because of a row over Wi-Fi on board Ryanair, right?
Yeah, so it's a couple of weeks ago, I guess Ryanair were considering a contract with Starlink, which is Elon Musk's company, to provide their Wi-Fi on the flight. They didn't decide to go ahead with it. So the spat kind of escalated, and Elon Musk said, I'm going to buy Ryanair, which he can't afford to do. Ryanair's worth sort of 34 billion, but that's not that much to him. And appoint a CEO called Brian to return the airline to its rightful place, given that it's called Ryanair.
Yeah.
So it's sort of silly jokes. It's gotten a bit more spiky with them accusing each other of knowing more about aerospace engineering.
Yeah, and Michael O'Leary is not taking this, as you can imagine. He says he's holding this press conference to address what he's describing as Musk's Twitter tantrum, not X, Twitter, which I'm sure is going to annoy Elon Musk even more. So yeah, 10 a.m, definitely worth keeping tuned to see what on earth.
It'd be better than the Trump speech. It'd be good, that.
It's going to be box office.
We'll preview all of it after this short break.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter? We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to. Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome. Westminster, the heart of British politics. I'm so sorry about what happened to you. So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think?
It's really unusual.
Mornings with Richard and Frost. Let's crack on. Let's get started. Good morning, it is 8 o'clock and welcome to Mornings with Ridge and Frost.
With Sophie and Wilfred, very good morning from me as well. Lots to get to.
Donald Trump is on the way to Davos for the World Economic Forum after delivering another threat about his ambition to take Greenland.
World leaders await him in a critical moment for the future of global alliances, but Keir Starmer won't be there.
We're also looking today at a finger prick blood test that could be an early warning for children with type 1 diabetes.
Plus, with so much debate over whether social media should be banned for under 16s, we've been asking teenagers in Australia whether their ban is working 6 weeks on.
Plus, with awards season in full swing, we're going to be having a look at this year's BAFTA hopefuls.
A very good morning to you. Welcome to the programme. Well, Donald Trump is on his way to Davos, where he'll join world leaders at the World Economic Forum in a critical moment for the future of the transatlantic alliance. Last night, President Trump spent almost 2 hours speaking to journalists about his accomplishments and also touched on various topics, including Greenland. He said the world would find out what will happen. He'll give a speech in Davos later today.
Yeah, so we're all waiting to find out, including, of course, all those world leaders who've gathered in Davos. I think it's fair to say the mood there is pretty sombre. The Canadian Prime Minister, Mark Carney, said yesterday that, in his words, we're in the midst of a rupture, not a transition. So, in other words, the old world order is over. We've got to get used to it.
Well, President Trump will be landing in Switzerland a little bit later than expected because Air Force One was turned around 40 minutes into its attempted flight. The White House said that a minor electrical fault was to blame. The president then boarded a new plane and left for a second time.
So before he left Washington, he was asked about the state of his relationships with Europe's leaders. This is what he said.
How would you characterize your relationship with Emmanuel Macron and Keir Starmer right now? And have you spoken to them since your Truth Social post last
No, I
night?
haven't, but I think I get along very well with them. I mean, they always treat me well. They get a little bit rough when they're, when I'm not around. But when I'm around, they treat me very nicely. And, I like both of them. They're both liberal. They've got to straighten out their countries. You can't, London is having a lot of problems, and if you look at Paris, got a lot of problems.
How far are you willing to go to acquire Greenland?
You'll find out.
I love it there where he talks about Keir Starmer and Emmanuel Macron saying, oh, yeah, they're really nice on my face, but then they get a bit rough when I'm not there. It's like a bit of a burn. Our correspondent Paul Calso is the story of what awaits Donald Trump when he does finally arrive in Davos.
It says World Economic Forum on the signs and on the delegates' badges here in Davos, but this week has really been all about one man and one country. Donald Trump's designs on Greenland and willingness to unleash economic war and share private messages from fellow presidents to get it has set the agenda and the tone of a united response from European and G7 leaders.
Arctic security can only be achieved together. And this is why the proposed additional tariffs are a mistake, especially between long-standing allies.
Here in the epicenter of this continent, we do believe that we need more growth, we need more stability in this world. But we do prefer respect to bullies, we do prefer science to plotism, and we do prefer rule of law to brutality.
We stand firmly with Greenland and Denmark and fully support their unique right to determine Greenland's future.
European leadership has been mocked by the American delegation to Davos. The EU president says they will not be bullied, but they are listening.
If this change is permanent, then Europe must change permanently too. It is time to seize this opportunity and build a new independent Europe.
Not every American here shares Trump's worldview. California's Democrat governor using language some wish Europeans would channel.
I can't take this complicity. People rolling over
I should have brought a bunch of knee pads for all the world leaders. I mean, handing out crowns and this is pathetic.
Europeans think this is diplomacy and this will ultimately
this is
work.
Diplomacy with Donald Trump? He's a T-Rex. You mate with him or he devours you. One or the other.
From the administration officials already here, no apologies.
The Trump administration and myself, we are here to make a very clear point. Globalization has failed the West and the United States of America. It's a failed policy. It is what the WEF has stood for, which is export, offshore, far shore, find the cheapest labor in the world, and the world is a better place for it. The fact is, it has left America behind. It has left the American workers behind.
The US has brought its biggest ever delegation to Davos this year, and there's a reason for that. Even before Greenland became the centre of attention, this argument about tariffs and trade is a fight America wants to have. I've just come from a briefing with its trade representative, Jameson Greer, and he was crystal clear. The terms of trade have been unfair to America for decades, that it's totally legitimate for Donald Trump to use tariffs to try and take over territory. And no one, not even Europe, not even the UK, can take access to American markets for granted. If there is to be a de-escalation in Davos, a gentle way down the mountain President Trump has led everyone up, it will come from the president in person. Paul Kelso, Sky News in Davos.
Of course, you remember Donald Trump really igniting this war of words over the Chagos Islands deal, the UK's decision to hand sovereignty to Mauritius. Donald Trump said it was an act of great stupidity. Well, this morning it has stepped up even another gear because this is the US Treasury Secretary in Davos just a few moments ago, and he said that when it comes to Chagos, the UK has let us down.
President Trump has made it clear that we will not outsource our national security or our hemispheric security to any other countries. Our partner, the UK, is letting us down with the base on Diego Garcia, which we had shared together for many, many years, and they want to turn it over to Mauritius. So President Trump is serious here.
I mean, I guess there was a little hint that maybe things would calm down as he got there.
Doesn't feel like it.
On specific issues, yeah, and not on Chagos, which, as we've all reflected on yesterday, kind of somewhat came out of the blue for the UK, given that 6 months ago they seemed to rubber stamp the deal, the US. President Trump arrives later today. Keir Starmer's not there. Chagos clearly still a major dividing issue.
Yeah, that's it. And look, the UK government would, as you say, Will, point towards the fact that the US said this was fine. They kind of signed it off. They agreed to it earlier last year. But it is politically difficult for Keir Starmer because both the Conservatives and Reform, in particular, are opposed to it.
And Nigel Farage is in Davos. Let's talk to Deborah Haynes now. We might get a follow-up question on that specific topic. But first of all, we wanted to talk about the broader opposition to Trump's policy on Greenland and the latest on Ukraine, because Deborah is in Kiev this morning. And Deborah, what is the latest? I mean, I guess the attention has been taken away from Ukraine somewhat, which is, I guess, part of the issue for European allies. What's the latest from Kiev?
Yes, well, I think the president here in Kyiv, he's supposed to have left for Davos yesterday, and he delayed that trip. The real sense that the whole Greenland rift, the rupture in the world order as well, is overshadowing what's happening in Ukraine. There has been a lot of work going on behind the scenes. A source told me that US and Ukrainian teams this weekend were poring over the details of this $800 billion prosperity package that there had been hopes would be signed at Davos. It's a package for future investment in Ukraine, future security guarantees as well, potentially, involving the US, European powers and, of course, Ukraine. There's no sign that that is going to happen now. And there's a real sort of sense that all of the concern about Greenland, the huge friction between NATO and, well, NATO, European and Canada allies and the US, is meaning that Ukraine, it's very cold here, but is being left out in the cold.
And Devs, while we've got you, you've obviously seen this kind of extraordinary war of words over the Chagos deal. What are your reflections on that?
I mean, that latest iteration, it's an absolute nightmare for the UK government. You know, the Chagos Islands, it includes Diego Garcia, which is this absolutely critical US-UK military base, fundamental for a launch pad for operations around the world. And the fact that the US initially, like you said, sort of rubber-stamped this controversial anyhow British government plan to basically hand back the islands to Mauritius, and actually under this sort of lease deal, which is going to cost billions of pounds. But there was always concern that that was something that the Trump administration would not want. There was surprise when back last year it seemed that they were actually okay with it. And so really we're shifting to what the position was that people had been anticipating, that this would go down really badly. And it doesn't just go down badly, it really flies in the face of all that Donald Trump is saying now about the need to underpin national security, come what may. And clearly he's adopting that policy when it comes to Greenland as well. So what's he going to do? Maybe he's going to seize the Chagos Islands too.
Well, that would be the next escalation of it. We shall see if the rhetoric sticks to being as firm as it is when President Trump gets there. Certainly what Secretary Bessent said this morning remained very firm indeed. Deb, as always, thanks so much in Kiev for us this morning. Now here, the ONS, the Office for National Statistics, published its inflation data report for the month of December this morning, and it came in at 3.4%. It was slightly higher than had been forecast. The forecast was for 3.3%, and it was up from the month of November, which was 3.2%. So you can see right on the edge of that chart, that slight tick up again after it had been falling since August. August, it had got up to 3.8%, falling and then just ticking up slightly. Tobacco, one of the reasons for it increasing. Food inflation, again, one of the reasons for it increasing, though most expectations continue to be that after the first few months of this year, it will continue its downward trend and get closer to that target of 2%, which you can see on the dotted line now on the chart. And all of this means next month we won't see a rate cut, which was already most people's expectations, but we might start seeing more later on in the year. Most people forecast 2 to 3 cuts this year. We're at 3.75% on the Bank of England base rate. People are expecting it to get closer to 3% by the end of the year.
So you can see why the government's worried about the cost of living, right? Because prices are ticking up higher than expected in those most recent figures. And so it's unveiling its warm home plans today. Families will be eligible to get thousands of pounds worth of kind of green tech like solar panels and heat pumps. And they're really trying to say this is all about cutting bills. Yeah, and it's going to provide £15 billion in order to overhaul households across the UK in the next 5 years. Well, our political correspondent Alex Rogers is here. Alex, again, understandably trying to focus people on their work towards the cost of living, ironically coming on a day when inflation came in a little hotter than expected.
Yeah, I think the government's probably been quite frustrated that it's not been able to talk about its domestic agenda since the start of the year because of Donald Trump. And again, now inflation just highlighting how much of an issue it continues to be despite their best efforts. And this Warm Homes Plan has been really welcomed by campaigners. They say it will do a lot to lift people out of fuel poverty. So I think we'll see the government pushing it more. And we heard it from Ed Miliband this morning as well on that. So,
do you think they've had to kind of water it down a bit? I guess it's interesting, I think, how At the beginning, it felt like they were saying this is all about net zero, about going green, and now the shift the communication shift has really changed to say this is actually about bills and affordability.
I think that's it. I mean, they had the 28 billion energy plan, if you remember, and that was sort of scaled back. And it's interesting how we're not hearing the word net zero that much. It's all about cost of living. And I think that's because the Tories in Reform have really been very anti this and just highlighted how expensive it is to the average individual, and they see it as a kind of political project that doesn't really have that much meaning behind it. So, yeah, interesting use of language there, as you said, yeah.
Alex, thanks very much indeed.
Yeah, by the way, we said this throughout the year. I think despite today's inflation picking up a bit, most expectations are by April, May, June, it's going to be much closer to 2%. So I think even if foreign policy is distracting the message at the moment, they're nailing their colours to the mast on cost of living, I think, in a sensible way, because I think they're going to get better news on it later in the year. There's just those, year-over-year comparison effects, albeit today the data a fraction higher than expected. Now, you go.
All children in the UK could be screened for type 1 diabetes. This is using a finger prick test, and it is after a landmark study that shows it could be really effective.
And the idea to stop children crash landing into a diagnosis and identify the disease before symptoms arise.
So I think it's really important to make the point that the two types of diabetes you can get are really very different. So type 1 diabetes means the body can't produce insulin because it attacks the cells in the pancreas. They don't know what causes it, but family history can slightly increase your risk. Type 1 diabetes also cannot be prevented or cured, and people have to treat it by taking insulin for life. It also requires a healthy lifestyle and medical supervision.
Whereas type 2 diabetes happens when the body is unable to make enough insulin. There are multiple factors that can be linked to it, from genetics and age to obesity. While type 1 diabetes can't be prevented, type 2 generally can be with healthy lifestyle and other factors. Type 2 diabetes may require insulin support, but can also be managed through changing your habits. Let's bring in Sadia, who's got more for us on this, and in particular, what's being developed with this new test.
Yeah, so the idea for this was to try and figure out whether finger prick blood testing children could be an effective screening tool. And ideally, that means looking at that blood, seeing if they have those markers that put children at risk of type 1 diabetes. And the study has found that it is an effective tool. And what that means is that we may see this being rolled out nationally. I'll tell you a little bit about the study first, because the reason they did this study was because about a quarter of children, which researchers say is far too many, who have type 1 diabetes are only diagnosed when they're in that emergency stage. And the idea behind this is to try and catch it early, to prevent them relying on insulin too early. And that means that they can be given treatments to prevent that insulin coming in too early, but also that NHS staff and families can be better aware and offer support to these children. That stage between being diagnosed and leading on to insulin is a really critical stage. It's a time when there's a lot of confusion about how to do your blood test, how often to do it, and when to do it. So early diagnosis is key. So this study was done by the University of Birmingham. It's been going on for 2 years. It's been described as a landmark study. It looked at children between the ages of 3 and 13, and they provided finger prick blood samples. That was then checked for antibodies that have previously been associated with pre-symptomatic patients, and the children that were identified as having a risk of type 1 diabetes were then invited for further blood tests. So out of over 17,000 tests that were analysed, more than 200 children were found to have been at risk or have those markers in their blood, which says that they could have a risk of type 1 diabetes. Next up is phase 2, which is going to last for the next 4 years, but that will see the rollout of clinics across different parts of the country. And in future, the hope is to catch this early so that people can delay that treatment of the insulin, to start other treatments, and then potentially the UK could join Italy, which was the first country that rolled out a national screening programme.
Sadia, great stuff. Thank you very much. Really interesting. Now, US President Donald Trump is on his way to the World Economic Forum in Davos, where he'll address world leaders and business chiefs. It comes as tensions flare between the US and Europe, of course, over his repeated threats to take control of Greenland. Well, the US Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, said that decision by some countries, including the UK, to send troops to Greenland had caused problems.
We're not putting a 10% tariff on Greenland. We're putting a 10% tariff on the 8 countries that chose to send troops to Greenland. I mean, for those countries to activate their troops, I'm not sure what signal that's supposed to send. It seems pretty quixotic to me.
We're joined now by the former Danish Foreign Minister Jeppe Kofod from Copenhagen. Thanks so much for joining us. Good to see you. It's interesting because it does seem not that this was an easy problem to solve for Denmark or for Greenland or indeed for Europe over the last couple of weeks and months, but it does seem like that attempt by European allies to send some military people there to help fend off Russia and China completely backfired, or at least was completely misinterpreted by the US. I wonder if that gives you any hope that tensions could be eased with face-to-face meetings today.
Well, I think it's always good to have some hope to solve this in a diplomatic manner, and also in the interest of both United States and Europe. But that exercise that were referred to, actually, United States was invited as well. So they didn't, I understand, respond to that. So it was not something that they didn't know about, or I don't think that they didn't find important. I mean, if you look at what President Trump has said over and over again, he has said that there's huge security concern in the Arctic, in Greenland, because of Russia, which is for good reason. You have to be concerned about the waging war in Europe, and also in the future China. And therefore, what Kingdom of Denmark and NATO has done, I think, very rightly and timely, is to deploy more military assets in Greenland, in the high north, as it's called, the Arctic region, to defend our core national security interest. And then these interests are also the US interest. So I don't really understand why it's being a problem as described here.
What do you think the solution is in the coming weeks and months? I mean, Donald Trump is clearly very committed to wanting to acquire Greenland.
Well, first of all, this whole idea of taking Greenland, not excluding any means, use of force or coercion or whatever, is of course utterly unacceptable, and it has been rejected by all Europeans. It's against the rules, norms that we have built up for centuries here. So that idea has to be dead and buried. But working together on Arctic security is very important, and there Trump has a point. I mean, the world has changed. We see much more activity in the Arctic region due to climate change, due to, of course, an assertive Russia and also Chinese global ambitions. And we should work together to protect our North Atlantic security, like we have done for almost 80 years in the alliance that United States, Denmark and the UK and others founded to protect ourselves, and has been so successful, not only for security, but also for prosperity between us, ensuring that we can grow our economies, trade, businesses, and become as prosperous as we are today. So I think if Trump really looks at the hard facts, what is in the core national interest of the United States, both economically and militarily, they would work with Kingdom of Denmark, with Europe, about these concerns.
Clearly, if we look at some of the rhetoric from Davos and elsewhere over the last couple of days, allies of Denmark and Greenland are taking sort of a range of approaches to respond. Mark Carney has been very clear, very firm in his rhetoric. Keir Starmer more conciliatory, and various European leaders somewhere in between. Is Denmark disappointed that the UK is not being tougher?
No, I think there's been not only in words, but also in deeds, clear support, solidarity to Greenland and Kingdom of Denmark. I mean, not only the declaration from all major European powers, the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Italy, others, but also, the fact that NATO, including the United Kingdom, has sent military assets to Greenland to reinforce security, I think is a symbol of support that is needed today. So no, I think that the point is that, the language of today is power. That is what drives the world, also in the view of President Trump. And if Europe really wants to be serious we have to pull together our, collective resources and say no to this idea of taking Greenland against the will of the Greenlandic people and nation. They have a right to self-determination. We have rules about sovereignty and territorial integrity that has served us well to preserve peace over the Atlantic for many, many years, as I said. So we have to show power in Europe. We have to come together much stronger. We have to build our military, our economy, so we are not being bullied. I think that is the point. I think Trump respects if we are strong. And I hope that the European allies will be strong today, rejecting the idea of taking Greenland, but say yes to Trump to work on security in the Arctic region, because that is, of course, needed.
Mr. Kofod, thanks so much for joining us. Very much appreciated.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Lots more to come. Here we'll be continuing to build up to President Trump's all-important speech in Davos today, but we're also going to be talking about the potential to ban social media here, 6 weeks on from Australia introducing their own ban. We'll be right back.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist. A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan has the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra Al-Baghir has this report.
And this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you?
People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
Welcome back. A reminder of the top stories this morning. US President Donald Trump is on his way to the World Economic Forum in Davos, where he'll address world leaders and business chiefs. It comes amid mounting tensions between the US and Europe over his threats to take control of Greenland.
British homeowners will be able to access low and zero interest loans to install solar panels, heat pumps and batteries. It's all part of the government's £15 billion warm homes plan that they say is aimed at cutting energy bills.
The rate of inflation rose to 3.4% in December. Official figures show it's up from 3.2% the month before, slightly higher than most economists had expected.
Well, there's an awful lot of moving parts this morning, again, on the international stage. So we just wanted to very, very quickly show you the latest from Strasbourg. This is Ursula von der Leyen of the European Commission, the EU Commission. And she has been, she's just left, I should say, actually. But we could tell you what... what she did say just a few moments before her speech finished. The main takeaway is that she's been talking tough on Greenland. The future of Greenland is only for Greenlanders to decide. And so she obviously addressed the World Economic Forum yesterday. She was speaking in Strasbourg today, I guess, reiterating that message. I think the latest, obviously it's still early in the morning in Davos as well. It's 1 hour different. I'm trying to think if it's 1 hour ahead or behind. I think it's ahead. I think it's 9:30 there, so it's still early. But we have already heard today afresh from the US administration, from Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary who's there, who had a very firm line still on Greenland. Also, we should say, a very firm line on Chagos, reiterating the kind of new take on it that the US has that we learnt about from President Trump, 36 hours ago. So, you know, the tensions remain as high as you could possibly expect ahead of Donald Trump's arrival, which has been slightly delayed. His speech was meant to be around lunchtime, but his flight was delayed, so he'll be there a bit later this afternoon. It's interesting, Ursula von der Leyen also saying this morning that in this increasingly lawless world, Europe needs its own levers of power. And this really, to me, does seem to be the kind of backdrop of Davos, really. We've heard Carney of Canada talking about a new world order and all that kind of thing as well. So I think it's pretty clear that things in the kind of global alliances are shifting rapidly. Now, we've been talking a lot about the possibility of the government banning social media for under-16s. And yesterday we told you that a consultation had been launched in the UK by the government. Politicians are watching what happens in Australia very closely, who, of course, brought in a similar ban 6 weeks ago. So we wanted to check in and find out if it's actually working, what the UK can learn from it. We can talk to our correspondent, Nicole Johnson, who joins us from Sydney. Nicole, how's it been going down?
Well, it's been a mixed bag, really. It's 6 weeks in, and it depends on who you talk to. We were warned by kids weeks ago that they would not let the government take them off their favourite social media apps, 10 of them, sites like Facebook, TikTok, Snapchat, and many of them have gone through with that. They say they found ways around it, around the age verification that is now on these apps that they've had to introduce. They either get an older sibling or a friend, or they even hold up a photo to try and trick the age verification. So it's not as solid as the government would have liked, but it had always realised that it was a bit of an uphill battle. But let's take a listen to what some of the kids had to say.
The social media ban definitely affected, well, me and my friendships a little bit, because especially on Snapchat, you go from talking every day and having a reason to talk to keep up streaks and all of that, and then it gets banned and you move to messages and you don't really have a reason to chat anymore.
To be honest, my life hasn't really changed 1 month on from the ban. A lot of my friends and I have been able to regain our accounts due to facial recognition not being fully accurate.
It's failed completely.
Failed in what way? Failed to do what?
Failed to block people from using it, and also failed as an idea.
I haven't really seen anybody use new social media apps. I think most people just like the apps that they have already.
I overall think that the ban is positive because kids get exposed to a lot of negative things online that can affect their mental health and body image and perception of others. And it's also quite fake, the platforms that they use.
Argument, and it's pretty clear an awful lot of kids are getting around this, right? But I guess, you know, we don't say, oh, just because some kids raid alcohol from their parents' booze cupboards, that means that we shouldn't say that we have a drinking age limit. I mean, is this just kind of inevitable, I guess, with law change?
I think it is inevitable, and that's the argument that the government's been making. There's still been 4.7 million accounts for kids under the age of 16 that have been closed. Hundreds of thousands of kids have been kicked off these apps. And the government had always said it would take time, it could take decades, really. But they are framing all of this as a cultural shift, a real change in this country, so that kids, instead of growing up addicted to social media, scrolling, harmful effects, online cyberbullying, The government wants them to be outside, enjoying the Australian summer, playing sport, learning musical instruments, hanging out with their friends. Now, how much of that is really happening? It's a bit too early to tell, but people do seem pretty patient. And even parents who have said that it's not working, their older teenagers are still on it. They do acknowledge that for the 8, 9, 10-year-olds, they think things will be different.
Nicole, great stuff. Thanks so much. Nicole Johnson there for us in Sydney.
We asked you to send in your views on this, and if you've got your views, then you can continue to do that mornings@sky.uk. A few people have actually sent in. It's quite interesting. These people are supportive of the ban, but saying that more needs to be done to stop people getting around it. So one mum emailed in saying that she strongly supports the ban. She's got a mum of a 13-year-old, really strict parental controls, but then found out that, her kids have been finding a way around them, downloading VPNs and that kind of thing. So she's saying that if a ban's to be effective, they need some tech-savvy individuals to be consulted to close these loopholes. Philippe as well, also in favour of a ban, but saying clearly there's ways to dodge age-related bans, as is illustrated in a report from Australia. And he's suggesting using national insurance numbers that people have from birth in order to verify age. Much more controls, I guess, for people setting up social media sites, social media platform accounts in the first place.
I guess it's another argument for some digital IDs as well. It's another way to enforce it, whether or not people like the sound of that or not. Let's discuss it more because, of course, ministers are starting a consultation on whether to consider that here or not. Baroness Keeley joins us, Chair of the Communications Digital Committee in the Lords. Very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Are you for or against a ban for under 16s on social media?
Well, the committee that I represent hasn't taken a position on it, but I'm personally not for a ban. I'm feeling against it at the moment.
And why is that?
Well, there are very strong opinions, but the campaigning organisations, all the stakeholder organisations like the NSPCC and the Molly Rose Foundation, those most involved with issues of children, young people and online safety, don't believe in a ban, don't believe it's the right thing, and are very direct about that. They believe what we've got to do is tighten up our online safety legislation.
Is it really an either-or thing, though? Like, you can say that, look, this online safety legislation is really important and also support a ban, right? It's not a reason to not have a ban, is it?
You can, but they also believe it's too blunt a response. There's this thing about the cliff edge. You're only postponing the age at which young people, do access social media,
but why,
and they will find ways around it.
To postpone it?
It could be, and I think that's why we've got the consultation that we've got that ministers have announced this week.
On that point, on the sort of consultation and the fact that Australia are testing it, what are kind of the learnings you're looking for from the situation in Australia, and what would sway you significantly in either direction based on how it all plays out there?
I think if we could be sure that it would prevent, many more children, young people from accessing, harmful material, particularly sexual abuse material, pornography, and also look for benefits to mental health. I think the benefits to mental health are the key thing that people are looking for.
Can I be honest? I'm a little bit puzzled as to why you're opposing it. Because on the one hand, you're saying that you're worried that it's not going to work, that people, will still access the internet. Then on the other hand, you say you're worried about cliff edge, and actually, so these feel like two contradictory concepts. I'm not actually clear.
Yeah.
Why do you personally, not the NSPCC, why do you personally oppose a ban?
We had an inquiry into media literacy earlier this year, and we were working with a group of young people. They didn't believe in a ban. It's a group of young parliamentarians representing people all up and down the country. They didn't believe in it. And we went to schools and talked to parents and other experts who really felt that we should be training young people, educating young people in media literacy and digital skills, getting them to understand how to keep themselves safe.
So that when they... I still am not clear why you don't think there should be a ban, because you're just talking there about some young people you've spoken to and parents saying you shouldn't have more. I'm just not clear why you personally don't think there should be a ban.
Because it's a blunt response and people think it won't work.
What is the alternatives that we could be doing in the short term with the legislation that already exists? You mentioned tightening it or using the full forces behind it.
Well, some of the things you talked about there, you talked about age verification, you talked about use of VPNs. These are all things which are in play and that we could be dealing with. But the biggest thing is just getting the tech platforms to actually do what they should do and not, have harmful material and not have algorithms which are difficult and pushing, damaging.
How's that going?
No.
I guess that's the thing, isn't it? Like, you could call out Elon Musk and say, let's take all this stuff down, then that's fine.
That's
but
right.
I guess the point is that we live in the real world, don't we?
Yes, that's right. Well, Ofcom are grappling with a new situation. I mean, the protections under the Online Safety Act only really came in a couple of months ago. I think people think because that legislation passed a long time ago, but it had a sort of staged implementation, and it's only really been there a couple of months. So, but I mean, continually we're asking, the committee I represent are asking Ofcom to tighten what they're doing and to just do more to keep children safe.
My final question on this is just where you see the political balance on this. I mean, so many issues get very politicised, and I think even on the social media space, when it comes to sort of free speech, it's fairly politicised. When it comes to protecting young people online, is there at least hope that people are broadly united, broadly not sort of ideological about it, but much rather practical about it? Or do you see this dividing quite a lot on party lines?
Well, you couldn't cast it with party lines. You can do that today with the debate we've got and the vote we've got tonight. But on my committee, we've got all parties represented, and we all take this very seriously indeed. It's one of our, most important priorities as a committee. And we will just continue to do what we can to try and keep children safe.
And you're looking at AI in particular, right?
Yes, that's a different inquiry. We're looking at AI and copyright at the moment.
OK, thank you very much indeed. Great to have you on the programme. Barbara Keeley there of that important House of Lords committee.
Now, it's almost 2 weeks since security forces in Iran opened fire on their own people in cities across the country. Relatively little is known about exactly what happened because the internet has been shut off for 13 days there.
But we are still getting some new footage coming through, and with it, of course, new stories. Our international correspondent, John Sparks, has been taking a look at one of them. So this is a 17-year-old boy who was killed in the crackdown and his family's attempt to try and get his body back.
A warning, his report does contain images viewers might find distressing.
Abu Fazl's family didn't want him to attend the protests on January the 8th, the night the regime opened fire on its own people. These images have only just emerged. Abu Fazl's aunt, Geeta, said the family began to look for the 17-year-old in the early hours.
They tried to call him, they tried to go to police station, detention centers, they tried to go to hospitals, any clinic around, but they weren't able to find him.
The boy's brother approached a vehicle that belonged to the morgue. The crew were picking up bodies in the street.
They told him, we have 3 kids inside the morgue vehicle. 2 of them, they do have their family. We know the names, but one of them is anonymous with no name. And he opened the body bag and it was the face of his brother. And they find him that night.
Neighbors told the family that they watched the young man die.
They were trying to hit him with anything that they had in their hand, with the boots, with the butt of their gun, with everything, while he was bleeding for 40 minutes. And he was gasping for life, right? And then he passed away.
More of John's report is available online, and we're going to be diving into it in a bit more detail next hour as well.
Yeah, just so many of these awful stories coming out. John Sparks covering that one in particular. Time now to have a look at the weather.
You're looking happy.
Well, the forecast looks good.
So you've sorted the travel insurance then?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News weather.
It's going to be mild and unsettled this week, turning colder over the weekend, and it will be quite windy through the rush hour with prolonged rain and some mountain snow over northeastern Scotland, more in southwest. In between, though, most places look pretty fine, bar the odd, mainly coastal shower. Eastern Scotland will see some rain and hill snow clearing to the far north by midday, leaving most northern and central parts fine. Ireland, Wales and southern and central England, meanwhile, will see rain spreading from the southwest with brighter skies and a scattering of blustery showers following to the west country. It will be mild but windy, with coastal gales likely in the southwest and northeast.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News Weather.
Coming up, we're talking movies. We're in award season, so we'll talk to the Chief Executive of BAFTA, Jane Millichip, about this year's ceremony.
First Minister, how are you?
Good morning. Good morning.
Nice to see you.
How are you feeling? Looking forward to getting into the parliamentary chamber.
Are you any further forward to making a decision?
No, it's an important day today.
All of the claims were in line with my parliamentary duties, so I'm making that clear to you, Connor.
He was a Scot through and through.
He was a very good politician.
Alex Salmond was controversial, he was a disruptor, but above all, he was respected.
Will you resign if you lose this week?
Again, I'm not planning to, of course, lose the vote of no confidence. I'm planning to win that vote of no confidence.
His face said it all.
My intention to stand down as party leader.
This is now a storm with deadly consequences. How are they feeling?
They're a bit scared at the minute. We've been told to evacuate.
How are you feeling?
Devastated.
Hundreds of homes were wiped out by flooding. I'm Connor Gillis, Sky's Scotland correspondent.
It was probably the darkest time in my life.
Scott is 5 years sober after a cocaine addiction left him close to death.
Scotland has a shameful record. Worse than England, the worst in Europe. Why not just say you've failed? Because then you might get more respect from families who've lost loved ones.
This is where one of the UK's most prolific rapists thought he'd got away with murder.
Sky News can reveal that former sex workers had told police he was sexually violent.
My Emma.
Free wherever you get your news.
It's over, isn't it? The Americans say he is Rossi, a fraudster.
This has been one of the most bizarre cases ever heard in a courtroom in this country.
A dangerous murderer.
Do you think you'll ever be able to forgive Andrew Ennis after this?
She said she can forgive him, but as long as he's behind bars.
By doing the right thing, it's destroyed your life.
They terrorised me. They intimidated me.
I'm so grateful.
Sky News, the full story first.
People that pod together, they have a little hive brain going on.
They've not had a good week.
I've had a good week. There's a teaser there, a teaser.
Ooh. OK, nothing to see here, drama over, full stop. Anyway, we'll get to that. She will be mortified.
She's the first female chancellor.
I popped upstairs, made myself a cheese sandwich, and now I'm with you.
Annalise has come dressed in the magenta of electoral dysfunction. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is.
First off, just the scale of what we're looking at.
Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
Hello again. It's now been a year since Donald Trump returned to the White House, and look, we can't stop talking about him because he keeps doing things that affect all of us. This is just another week where world affairs have been driven by the actions of the president. It's almost too much to keep up with.
Well, our US correspondent Mark Stone has been looking back at the last 12 months, and here's a sizzle of his full report, which is well worth watching online.
Donald J. Trump.
This is going to be great television, I will say that. You don't have the cards right now. Many points were agreed to. Thank you very much, Vladimir. Indonesia, Malaysia.
The longest federal government shutdown.
The bill is passed. Came into our country illegally. Going to take our capital back. We're taking it back.
I'm not the only one who
This took 3,000 years. Moment for America. They've been after this guy for years and years. The greatest were a spectacular civilization, fair and reciprocal. Never bend and never yield. I love this country. America is back.
It's been an extraordinary 12 months.
So much, so fast, so easy to miss the significance of moments that we're all living through. Easy, actually, to normalise it all. And so, a year since his inauguration, let's take stock of this Trump presidency. Pause, reflect, project. Where does all this take America and the rest of us?
As we said, well worth watching Mark's full report on that first year in office for Donald Trump, Mark II. It's available on the Sky News website and app, and we'll continue building up the coverage, of course, ahead of Donald Trump's speech in Davos later this afternoon. Now, this year's BAFTAs get underway next month, and the ceremony will be hosted by the Traitors US and Good Wife star Alan Cumming. Nominations are announced next week, with the stars of Hamnet and Marty Supreme among the favourites to win. Delighted to say, joining us now to talk more about that and the work that BAFTA does more broadly, is the Chief Exec of BAFTA, Jane Millerchip. Jane, very good morning to you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. Good to be here.
So we were just talking, so you announced the nominees for all of the awards next Tuesday.
Correct.
And then the awards themselves are on the 22nd of February. It's kind of a reminder of how intense the period is. So all of your voters will have to cast their votes in a sort of month space of time.
Yeah, well, we encourage them to watch as many films and go to the cinema as much as they can, particularly in the fourth quarter of the year. The first round of voting is around Christmas time, and then we produce what we call the long list, which I think is a great thing to celebrate because when anybody says to me during the year, can you recommend a watch list? I always say, go back to the BAFTA long list. It's brilliant, it's varied, it's full of rich storytelling. And then we move to nominations, and we announce those on Tuesday, and then our voters have another opportunity to vote before the awards themselves on the 22nd of Feb.
You obviously sit between the Globes, the Golden Globes that we've already had, and the Oscars to come. How important is that, and how strategically thought through is that for BAFTA to be kind of placed there to give BAFTA itself and British film a significant place on the agenda? It's
very strategic, and we work quite closely with the other awards bodies so that we don't so that we all have a good date, as it were, and we collaborate with them because it's in all our interest that we all succeed. And for some years now, BAFTA has gone about 3 weeks before the Oscars, and we're seen increasingly as a bellwether for the Oscars. But we are probably the biggest international film awards alongside those big award ceremonies in the States. And we celebrate international film, but what makes us different is our Britishness. And we have a couple of categories in which we celebrate British film, outstanding British film and outstanding debut. And so it's a really rich mix of British talent, and it's amazing. We get full support from the US studios, which is fantastic. And many of those US studios have supported British film this year. So it's really a global community, but we really want to foreground British talent.
It's interesting because we can all get a bit depressed about, how well or not the economy is doing at certain points. But this is an industry where we are as good as any nation, perhaps the best in the world. I mean, we certainly punch above our weight on a sort of relative to population type basis.
Absolutely. I mean, the creative industries are worth about 125 billion to the UK, which is extraordinary. And you've seen in recent years that US studios have been building increasingly studios all over the UK. Our talent pipeline is seen as exceptional, particularly our craft. And we do punch above our weight. And we are influential in our storytelling. If you just look at the films in the long list at the moment, extraordinary talent. So, it's really important to the UK culturally. It's really important to the world culturally and definitely to the economy.
I guess a lot of people do think of BAFTA as the awards ceremony, but it's much more than that.
Yes.
What are some of the other kind of headline things that you spend some of the money you raise on?
Well, we're a big arts charity, and we also represent film, games and television. So we're unusual in that we support 3 sectors in the screen arts. But we run a number of talent programmes in which we look to level the playing field in the screen arts, provide opportunity particularly for underrepresented groups. We have refreshed our membership in recent years to ensure that it is representative of the population as a whole. You know, representation matters because if we invite into the community of the screen arts as many people as we can and talented people from all quarters of society, the stories they tell are then more representative and connect more with audiences. But we run bursaries, scholarships, in career acceleration programmes, a whole suite of programmes.
I guess the framing I think many would have is that there was a great progress in the industry for decades on that, and that it's tailed off or plateaued. Is that fair or not?
Well, I think the screen industries go through ebbs and flows. In television at the moment, there are challenges with the downturn in advertising. And I think there has been particular challenges for the freelance sector. So we're turning our attention on a lot of our talent schemes to try and help freelancers particularly navigate careers that we need to try and make sustainable and agile. But yeah, there are peaks and troughs in the industry. I've been around long enough to see both many times. But I think the cultural sector in the UK needs support. It's really important culturally, socially, as well as economically. And we've got a lot of talent here, and we've got an amazing pipeline that we need to continue to foster, all the way from creative arts in schools through to in-career development programmes.
I had one quick final question. You know, there's a Netflix are in the process potentially of buying Warner Brothers Discovery. It's a complicated kind of battle at the moment. Some question whether that would push more Warner Brothers, a film studio, to the small screen. Where do you stand on the importance? You said at the start, encourage your voters to go to the cinema to watch films. How important is the big screen?
It's really important because nothing really replaces that amazing moment when the lights go down, whether you're with friends or on your own. And it's a really important experience. It really connects with audiences. And in our awards, our entry criteria, we do require films to have had a cinema release before they go on to streaming platforms. And so we do support the theatres and cinema going. But it's part of a mix nowadays. And, you know, the streamers have put a lot of investment into filmmaking, which is very welcome. But if you can go to the cinemas, please go. And I was talking to some of your team in the green room earlier, and they were waxing lyrically about the films they'd seen at the cinema this weekend. So
there are some good ones this year, for sure.
There are.
I went to see Marty Supreme recently. It was very, very good. We're out of time. Jane, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Great to see Jane Millerchip, the Chief Executive of BAFTA. Lots more still to come next hour.
Yeah, an awful lot going on, of course, with the focus on Davos. Donald Trump's heading there, Keir Starmer isn't, but look, there's going to be an awful lot of focus on the kind of new world order, if you like, and how to handle the threats the US president's made on Greenland in particular.
We're going to continue build up to President Trump's address in Davos after the break and reflect on some domestic news, including the inflation print after this break.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to.
Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome. Westminster, the heart of British politics. I'm so sorry about what happened to you. So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think?
It's really unusual.
Mornings with Richard and Frost. Let's crack on. Let's get started.
Good morning, it's 9 o'clock. Welcome to Mornings with Ridge and Frost.
With Sophy and Wilf, good morning from the both of us. Lots to get to in Davos.
President Trump is bound for Davos, but he'll arrive to a wall of European defiance as leaders there join Canada in anger over his tariffs.
We stand ready to defend ourselves, our member states, our citizens, our companies, against any form of coercion.
But as the fight back begins against Donald Trump, Keir Starmer maintains a gentler approach, and he's still, of course, notably absent from the economic summit.
Also today, a finger prick blood test could be an early warning sign for children with type 1 diabetes.
Plus, the debate continues about whether to ban social media for under-16s. We've been asking teenagers in Australia whether their ban is working 6 weeks on.
And we're building up to what could be a blockbuster briefing from Ryanair's boss, Michael O'Leary, who's had an online spat with Elon Musk over the last couple of weeks. He's holding a press conference about it shortly.
Good morning, welcome to the programme. Donald Trump is on his way to Davos, where he's going to be joining world leaders at the World Economic Forum it's a critical moment for the future of the transatlantic alliance.
Well, before leaving Washington, the president said that the world would find out when asked how far he was willing to go to acquire Greenland. He'll make a speech later today.
And the mood in Davos is pretty serious, as you'd expect, because the stakes are so high. This morning, there's already been some tough talk from European leaders, both from Davos and also Strasbourg today.
We must deal with the world as it is now. Which brings me to the second reality and imperative for Europe, and that is to speed up our push for independence. Whether in our economy or in our security, whether on technology or democracy, we have to be strong in shaping ourselves if we don't want to shape the world around us. Greenland is home to a free and sovereign people. It is a nation with its sovereignty and its right to territorial integrity, and the future of Greenland is only for the Greenlanders to decide.
We are united around the principles of international law, territorial integrity and national sovereignty. Second, we are united in full support and solidarity with the Kingdom of Denmark and with Greenland. Only they, Denmark and Greenland, can decide on their future. Third, we recognize that there is a shared transatlantic interest in peace and security in the Arctic, notably working through NATO. Fourth, further tariffs would undermine transatlantic relations and are incompatible with the EU-US agreement. Fifth, we stand ready to defend ourselves, our member states, our citizens, our companies against any form of coercion. And the European Union has the power and the tools to do so.
Look, I don't think it's any exaggeration to say that those kind of post-war alliances, consensuses are now been looked at with fresh eyes by just about everybody. That is the backdrop to Donald Trump arriving in Davos and giving the speech that he's going to be doing.
Yeah, he's going to be giving that speech a little bit later than expected today after his flight was turned around 40 minutes in to it, and then he got off the original plane after what was described as a minor electrical fault and got onto a different plane instead, and will be there a bit later than expected. I don't think we have his exact speech time yet, but I imagine it will now be mid-afternoon rather than early afternoon. Yalda is in Davos for us ahead of his arrival.
Davos is essentially the biggest networking event on the planet. It's where the global elite come. And frankly, Donald Trump and his populist administration enjoy coming here. This will be his third Davos. Last year, he beamed here to all the delegates via a webcam a couple of days after he was inaugurated and promised that he would be here. And he is arriving. He is going to be late, as you say, because of those technical issues with his aircraft. And European leaders are holding their breath. Donald Trump, in that astonishing press conference, that impromptu press conference, the sort of press conference he holds before he leaves for a trip, made some striking remarks, and he doubled down on his ambition to acquire Greenland. And yesterday, we did hear Mark Carney, the Prime Minister of Canada, use quite tough words. He said that the world order, the sort of world order as we've known it, is finished, and we shouldn't pretend like it still exists. Emmanuel Macron sent a very similar message. He said that, you know, we don't appreciate bullying. So they are not necessarily using Donald Trump's name, but they're sending very direct messages to him. But Wilf, the question is, will Europe stand firm? Will they remain defiant? Or will they find themselves in a position where they frankly have to strike some kind of deal with Donald Trump? You know, this conference this year was supposed to focus on a deal over Ukraine, offering security guarantees, offering an aid package to Ukraine. That is now on hold. The United States didn't send a representative on Monday to meetings here with the rest of Europe to discuss plans for Ukraine. Volodymyr Zelensky was a keynote speaker here last year, and now there are questions being asked about the future of NATO and how dangerous this moment is, not just for Europe, not just for the Western alliance, but for the future of NATO. And certainly that is music to the ears of the Chinese, the Russians, who are not really having to do much, but are being gifted this tension, this wedge that has been created between the United States and Europe, not because Europe has wanted it, but frankly because Donald Trump is saying to the global elites who have gathered here, you know, America first doesn't necessarily mean America alone, but it certainly means that perhaps the Western world is now alone.
Well, Yada mentioned there the way in which Ukraine and its potential 880 billion of funding had been top of the agenda before the week started and has dropped off the agenda. We're going to talk about that with Deborah Haynes in Kiev in just a moment. But we also, before we get to that, just wanted to show the latest on the Chagos Islands, which, of course, Donald Trump changed his tune on 36 hours ago. Well, this morning, we've heard more about this from the US perspective. The US Treasury Secretary was speaking an hour or two ago.
President Trump has made it clear that we will not outsource our national security or our hemispheric security to any other countries. Our partner, the UK, is letting us down with the base on Diego Garcia, which we had shared together for many, many years, and they want to turn it over to Mauritius. So President Trump is serious here.
That was US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent a few hours ago. Deborah Haynes joins us now from Kiev. Deb, I want to talk about Ukraine in a moment, but first, really keen to get your take on this Chagos Island stuff. I mean, everyone can see how impossible it must be for the UK and others to deal with the US administration when they can turn their positions so overtly on something like this in the space of 6 months. What secretly are the military UK voices saying about this? Do they want this deal to go through? Is it still ultimately expected to go through as agreed many weeks and months ago?
Well, as you're hearing publicly from politicians, there's obviously a division over what the right thing to do is. Labour and the government clearly weighed up the arguments and decided that the most secure way to guarantee that this critical base in Diego Garcia, it's a UK-US military base, will be able to remain is by signing this deal with Mauritius, which basically involves leasing that territory for the next century. There's been a dangling threat of legal action over the future of the Chagos Islands for a long time, and that has been why not just this government but the previous government under the Conservatives have been looking at it. And for the military, they obviously want to have the security that they can continue to use the base, but nobody is happy at the idea of jeopardy when it comes to the future ability of the UK military and its US allies to be able to keep operating off Diego Garcia, and that's where the bind is. And actually you're hearing it incredibly bluntly then from the US side, saying that the UK has let them down. That is going to be incredibly alarming language for the UK, because let's face it, since the end of the Second World War, the UK has formulated its entire military and security posture on the belief, on the understanding that the US would always be on its side. If that is not the case, if there is a future where obviously we're looking a lot at NATO, and it clearly applies for NATO too, but the UK has this uniquely close bond with the US. It relies on the US to enable most of its military capabilities to operate properly, to operate fully, and to be able to fight. And so a future in which the US and the UK have a rupture is one that is incredibly daunting. And clearly inside the MOD and the Foreign Office, they will be trying to keep calm and hope that they can bring this back from the brink. But it really does expose the incredible vulnerability that the UK has when it comes to ensuring the US is a tight, close friend.
Yeah, Deborah, I mean, you just laid it out, haven't you? Just what a huge, potentially consequential moment this is, not just for the individual issues, but for the whole of the UK's defence position as well. And I guess it has implications for Ukraine as well. You're obviously in Kyiv. Can Europe rely on the United States to effectively, be the policeman of the world?
Well, yeah, I mean, here in Ukraine, they are feeling incredibly isolated. There was a real ambition at the Davos summit for President Zelensky to travel there, meet with Donald Trump. There's a lot of work's been going on to finalise this prosperity package. It's a 10-year package, $800 billion, that is all designed to lock in US investment to a future secure Ukraine. And there is, of course, as well, the US-Ukraine bilateral agreement, including security guarantees. These are all things that European allies and the Ukrainians have been wanting to secure, at the same time as, obviously, Donald Trump is looking to oversee some kind of peace deal. But, of course, you've also got this board of peace cropping up, and the Ukrainians being invited to be part of that alongside Vladimir Putin. And that's going down as well as you can imagine, as in really badly.
Deb's great stuff. Thanks so much. Deborah Haynes there for us in Kiev this morning. Again, so linked to all that's going on further afield in foreign affairs. Now, the Office for National Statistics has published its inflation data for December. The figure was 3.4% for December, slightly higher than expected. The forecast was for 3.3%. It was up from 3.2% in November. Tobacco taxes and higher travel costs over the Christmas period were two of the reasons behind it. Of course, as you can see from that chart, it shows a slight tick back up in the direction of travel right at the end of that chart and further away from that 2% inflation target, but is still lower than the August-September peak last year, or short-term peak of 3.8%. And it is expected to fall again closer to the 2% of target by the spring. No rate cuts expected for next month, given though that's slightly higher than expected reading at 3.4%.
And really, I guess that just underlines why the government is so concerned about the cost of living. They're unveiling their Warm Homes plan today, which is effectively money, grants to help people get things like solar panels and heat pumps in their house. But it's all being framed through helping with bills, helping with the cost of living.
The aim is to provide £15 billion to overhaul households across the UK in the next 5 years. Well, our political correspondent Alex Rogers is here with all the details of this. Alex, what's been announced?
So the government's just announcing more support, basically making it a bit more viable for people to buy these heat pumps and solar panels. So grants that you were saying up to, I think, $5 billion for some households for solar panels and low-income households. So really just putting the emphasis back on the cost of living and what the government's doing domestically. It's been trying to get that message out since the beginning of the year, but has been unable to because of global events.
It feels like there's been a shift in tone. Do you think that's fair? Like between the days when they're talking all about the kind of net zero and the need to go green, and now it's all about this is going to help you with your bills.
I think the language around this has really changed. I didn't see many references to net zero there, but it is all about the cost of living and lowering bills. And I think that's because net zero has become quite politicised over the past few years. It's become less popular. Reform and the Tories have really hammered it as a kind of policy that's going to hit ordinary working people. So it makes sense that if the government's trying to talk about how they can improve people's lives, they might not want to mention net zero.
Yeah, does make sense, definitely.
Alex, great stuff. Thanks so much. Now, all children in the UK could be screened for type 1 diabetes using a finger prick test following a landmark study.
So the idea is to stop like a sudden diagnosis, a crash landing, if you like, and then identify the disease before children actually get symptoms.
Well, Sadia joins us with more details of this. So what exactly is the condition we're talking about and what's the development with this prick test?
So this is for type 1 diabetes, and currently researchers say far too many children, which is a quarter of children who are diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, are diagnosed at a stage when they're already in a medical emergency. And so the idea behind this is to try and see whether a finger prick blood test on children could become an effective tool for all children and to be rolled out across. The study says it is effective tool, which means we may see a situation one day when we see this as a national sort of rollout. Early diagnosis is key because between knowing that you've got type 1 diabetes and becoming reliant on insulin, that stage is really key. And for children especially, to know how to do their tests, when to do it. And certain drugs can be added in as treatments then to delay that reliance on insulin. But it also gives a chance for health workers and parents and families to better support children during that stage. So this study was conducted and led by the University of Birmingham. It's being described as a landmark study. It looked at children between the ages of 3 and 13 who don't have type 1 diabetes. They provided a finger prick blood sample, which was then checked for the antibodies that are associated with people with pre-symptomatic diabetes. And the children who are identified as having a risk to type 1 diabetes were then invited for further blood tests and sugar tolerance tests. More than 17,000 tests were analysed and more than 200 children were found to be at risk or to have those markers in their blood to suggest that they are at risk. Next up is phase 2, which is going to last for 4 years, and that will see NHS pre-diabetes clinics set up for children in the areas where those studies were being conducted. In the future, the hope is to delay that treatment that relies on insulin and to have other treatments in place first. And then the UK could potentially join Italy, which was the first country to introduce a national rollout for this scheme.
So great stuff. Thank you so much.
We've been talking about a potential ban on social media for under-16s. It's something the government here is consulting on, so they're definitely considering it. And it's been 6 weeks now in Australia, so we thought it was a good time to kind of take a check, really, and find out how it's going there. As always, when we cover the story, the inbox lights up, and it lights up with people who are frankly in favour of a ban. We just wanted to give you, a bit of the reaction that's been coming in. We've had a couple of emails from people from Australia as well. So this is Tom from Australia who said, one of the recurring questions seems to be whether the ban is effective in completely stopping kids from accessing platforms. Tom goes on to say, from what we've seen here, the honest answer is not perfectly, but he says that misses the bigger point. It's similar to when underage smoking laws were introduced because teenagers could still find ways around it. But the real impact was setting a clear societal standard about what was acceptable. It shifted expectations and social norms over time. So look, people are going to get around it, but that doesn't mean it's not going to have an impact as well. Gemma emailed in, again, someone who strongly supports the ban, who says, as a mum of a 13-year-old, I've been doing everything in my power to keep them off social media, implementing strict parental controls at home, but then finding out that her kid had found a way around the controls. She said a simple policy won't suffice, may only teach children that they can break the law without consequences. So she's in favour of a ban, but she just says that actually, look, we need to just really kind of toughen it up to make sure it works. And then finally, we got this in from Sheila, who had a suggestion of her own. Why doesn't the government set up a site that allows social media for school children, controlling what time it's available each day, the way their screen time can be controlled, only accessible in certain hours? And she also said it's a way to only allow certain subjects like ads focusing on child safety organisations.
It is, you're right, it always lights up the inbox, this. Also highlights, maybe not surprisingly, but we've got quite a few viewers in Australia.
Yeah.
My favourite one from Australia this morning comes from Mike Hawke, which is also quite a good Australian name. Sounds like the opening batsman for the Australian cricket team. Who just says, just says, I live down under and I really love your show.
Yeah, we like that.
Cheers, Mike.
Thanks for watching. Don't email us about the Ashes, though.
I was going to say, we'll let you win the Ashes for more praise like that. Anyway, great to get your emails. Always get in touch, mornings at sky.uk.
After the break, we'll be talking about the Conservatives. They're in favour of the ban, so it'll be interesting to see their take on this subject too.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist.
A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan has the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra Al-Baghir has this report. And this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you?
People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
Well, an awful lot of news around today on the international stage with Davos in full swing, but some domestic stuff too. Here now is the Conservative MP, Shadow Secretary of State for Northern Ireland as well, Alex Burger-Hart. It's great to have you on the programme. We've been talking about social media just before you came on, and I'm interested to get your take on this. Do you welcome the fact that the government's consulting on a ban?
And I'm obviously delighted the government's changed its position because Keir Starmer was quite hard against this at first, which we were surprised by, to be honest. And but there's been a lot of representations from people in his party and obviously campaigners from outside and from the Conservatives, and he's now announced a review. So that's good. And I actually think he could just be getting on with it, but hopefully the result of the review will show him what everybody else already seems to know.
I'm interested because you're a former teacher, I'm right in saying that?
That's right, long time ago.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if there was phones in schools and all that kind of thing when you were teaching, but has it impacted your view on it? Do you think your experience there?
So, certainly, and my parents were both teachers, and I taught for a while, and I think that there's just a sense out there amongst a lot of parents and a lot of young people that children ought to be allowed to be children. And we know that the policy that we've suggested, which is that under 16s should not be on social media, should not be on anything with an algorithm which can lead them into particular directions, sometimes very damaging directions. We know that this is popular with parents who want a bit of help from government to say, you're not going to do it and your friends aren't going to do it. And but it's also popular with young people who sort of feel that they have to be online in order to keep up with what everyone else is seeing. And actually to take that away and give them a bit of space, I think is going to be a really good thing.
We've had 100 days of Trump 2.0. How would you describe his presidency?
It's a whirlwind, isn't it? And the president is a very unusual force in global politics. And I think that the situation we're in right now is very, very concerning. And I can see that a misstep at this moment might lead to the collapse of NATO. And the collapse of NATO will probably mean that Putin wins in Ukraine. And the consequence of that is that you then have a very large Russian army and a very large Russian war machine on the eastern border of Europe, and Europe without American security guarantees. We should be scared about that, and we should do everything that we can to prevent that from happening.
Are you scared about that?
I'm very concerned about it. That Europe as a whole has underspent on defence for far too long, and there is now a clear and present danger that we sort of, a lot of Europe has been assuming that American support would be indefinite. I hope that we can preserve NATO. That's why we've called on the Prime Minister to use his convening power, call an emergency meeting of the North Atlantic Treaty Organisation, so that we can talk about things like Arctic security in a kind of clear and level-headed manner.
There are two ways of looking at this, right? Some people say the Keir Starmer approach is the right one because it's pragmatic. You've got to keep America on side. Let's be real. That's the right thing to do. Others say the only way to beat a bully is to stand up to him. What's your view? So
I just use slightly different language. I think you have friends because they're people who are honest with you. And so if one of your allies is doing something that's out of line, it's your duty to say, look, on this we disagree with you, and here's why. And I think it's in everybody's interest if we try a different approach.
Which I guess is what Keir Starmer's done on Greenland, you could say. Do you think he's done okay?
I think the Prime Minister has been pretty clear on Greenland. But as I say, we need a little bit more proactive work. There are ways of engaging with America, particularly, I say, through NATO. So let's get on and do that.
There's been a lot of talk about the Chagos Islands as well. Donald Trump calling it an act of stupidity. We heard Scott Besson talking about it earlier as well. I mean, negotiations over Chagos began under the Conservatives, so right, in 2022. The Conservative government had 11 rounds of negotiations. Is that something that you got wrong?
There were talks, but look, just to be absolutely clear, we would never, ever have signed this deal. And this is...
You started the talks under Rishi Sunak.
We have
11 rounds of negotiations.
We have talks with a lot of people all the time, but there's a massive difference between talking to someone and signing...
You announced negotiations. But as I say... Not like it was just a kind of like a couple of chats about it in the corridor.
There's an enormous difference between talking to somebody and signing a very bad deal which will cost the British people £35 billion. It is the worst real estate deal in history. And when I was a history teacher, we used to say that the worst deal ever was when the Lenape people sold Manhattan Island for 60 guilders and a handful of beads. But at least they got 60 guilders and a handful of beads. We're going to pay £35 billion to give this sovereign territory away.
Donald Trump isn't talking about the nuts and bolts of the deal. It didn't even seem like he realised the numbers, to be completely honest, when he talked about it before, because he was talking about maybe we needed the money. That's a different point. He doesn't agree with the principle, and it was the negotiations that you started under the Conservative government that you're now trying to wash your hands of.
We would not have signed this deal. We would not have done this deal. There is a big difference between having a negotiation, talking to someone and signing a deal. We would never have signed this deal.
Okay.
And on principle, and also for the simple fact that it is going to be damaging to our national security. The Prime Minister should not have done this.
OK, good to have you on the programme. Thanks very much for being here. Alex Berger speaking to us there.
Of course, Davos continues, building up to President Trump's arrival later today. Currently on stage, NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte. He's with the Polish president, among others. Also, we just saw Alexander Stubb as well, the Finnish president. That's Alexander Stubb there, and the Polish president. Let's listen in for a minute.
We're now in a phase in the transatlantic relationship, and you'll know that I'm pro-European, pro-American, and therefore, by default, pro-transatlantic. We are in a relationship which is much more direct than it's ever actually been. I mean, the communication channels that we have directly with the president and with the administration are actually good and solid. And then, you know, at times there are curveballs flying in different types of directions. We try to catch them and we try to solve them. You know, you have two schools of thought here on Greenland. One is to de-escalate, and the other one is to escalate to de-escalate. And I think at the end of the day, we'll find an off-ramp on this. I'll make two final remarks. If someone would have told me in Washington, D.C., for the 75th anniversary of the alliance, that we're going to increase our defense expenditure next year to 5%, I would have said, you have no clue about international relations or seek help with a doctor. We did. And I think what we need as an off-ramp now is some kind of a process whereby we start working on a real problem, which is Arctic security. Unfortunately, as Mark said, we have 7 countries, Arctic countries, one of them with a huge military that can help to deal with this. So let's start working towards a process which leads us to a NATO summit in Ankara where we actually strengthen Arctic security within the alliance. So this is what we're working on.
Okay. Nadia, I'd like to ask you about the money. This is a key point also to can Europe defend itself, which is the topic that we're discussing today. The EU is freeing up hundreds of billions of euros to ramp up defense spending. You're part of that. You have quickly ramped up your capacity to mobilize capital for defense investment. This is something that's new for your bank, we also have to mention. How much do you see your future being defense and defense-related projects?
It's been a sea change in the last 2 years, and we were just discussing with Alex that in the past was also working at the European Investment Bank, how things have changed, you know, in the last couple of years, in that we have extended the scope of projects we are financing, and we have reached this magical number of 5% of our financing inside the Union last year, in 2025. So that outperformed our targets. We were hoping to reach that level this year in 26, but we already did in 25. We have a very robust pipeline of flagship projects, a number of them in Poland, by the way. So that's European solidarity, actually supporting the defense of Poland on the eastern flank. And so my answer would undoubtedly be, yes, Europe can defend itself.
Yeah. Paul, I'd like to turn to you also with that, because there's a role for the private sector as well here. NATO is treating medical preparedness as part of collective defense. You have many of your capabilities anchored in Europe.
So, of course, the agenda continues there at the World Economic Forum in Davos, and all eyes are really building up to President Trump's arrival and his keynote address to the attendees there. Let's discuss it now with the chair of Republican Overseas, Greg Swenson, who's here with us. Very good morning to you, Greg.
Great to see you, Will.
Thanks so much for joining us. President Trump, we know, is unorthodox and we know can be blunt. When you look at the last couple of weeks and the way in which he has threatened core allies who he's already supposedly made a trade deal with over the topic of Greenland, do you pause and think he's gone too far?
Yeah, I mean, in some respects, you know, he's unfiltered and very candid, and that's refreshing most of the time. And I think sometimes he oversteps, and I think that's, you know, pretty much the case over the weekend, that's for sure. But I think it will work. And, you know, what President Trump cares about is the outcomes. And how he gets there is a bit, you know, unorthodox and often provocative. But I think in this case, like as usual, he will get to the right outcome, and that's what's important.
But when does the collateral damage become too much? I mean, just look at Canada over the last couple of days, removing trade tariffs on China, a very clear speech from Mark Carney yesterday. You know, there's only so far you can push your allies around before they go and strike
I think,
other
allegiances.
allegiances.
Canada's a pretty unique story. I mean, they used to be one of the larger militaries in NATO, and now they're a small fraction of what they were. And so I don't think the president is that concerned about Canada. And I would argue that they're not as important as they used to be. So I think the fact that they're you could argue he's that the president's pushing Canada or other allies toward China. I think it's quite the opposite. I think the most important thing, one of the most important issues for the president in many respects is China, and making sure that there isn't that collaboration between China and Russia. That's important. And I think that for the most part, maybe Mark Carney's an exception, but for the most part, everything that the president is doing, he's keeping China in mind and making sure that that adversary doesn't become more of a problem for the U.S. and the West.
You said at the beginning that Donald Trump's focused on outcomes, and that although the method of getting there might be a bit bumpy, the outcome is normally right.
Right.
But if you look at something like Greenland, where he's been very specific, is that an acceptable outcome? Where he's basically just saying, I'm going to go in there and take Greenland no matter what the people who live there think?
Yeah,
that can't be right, can it?
It's provocative, and surely the president will not end up doing that, right?
So you don't think that he's serious then about taking Greenland?
No, I think the outcome is going to be some sort of partnership. It could be at best a COFA, a compact of association. We have that with some small countries like the Marshall Islands. And you can argue that Greenland is a small country, not geographically, but 57,000 people. And so I think that's ultimately what the president has his eyes on, is some sort of agreement where we can add military bases without having to go to Denmark and ask for permission.
You can already do that, can't you, right?
Yeah,
the US can effectively do what it... They can have... They've already got a military presence in Greenland.
They have one base, and we need a lot more. And I think it's important to, again, it's on the margins, right? We can add military bases with the permission of Copenhagen and of Greenland. And so I think, there needs to be a little bit more control on that. And then, of course, the critical minerals... right now, the Greenland has banned the exploration of uranium or development of uranium. They put a moratorium on oil and gas leases. So, these are things that are small and can be managed at the margin.
That's their right, though, isn't it? That's the whole point. That's their right.
Of course it is. And I think with a bit more control of both of those issues in Greenland, like we have with the Marshall Islands and other small countries, that it just can be better for the U.S., but more importantly, better for NATO, better for the West.
What's happened with the Chagos Islands? Why has this suddenly jumped up on the agenda for President Trump? Yeah. And I think it's inarguable, a U-turn in terms of the U.S. administration's position on this.
Yeah, it's a great question, Wilf. And I think we were all frustrated, those of us in the U.K. that wanted the president to step in and either block or coerce the prime minister, regarding the Chagos Islands, and he finally did. And we were, we thought that was like refreshing. Better now, better late than never. And I know that the Secretary of State Marco Rubio had made some comments earlier in the process. I think being very diplomatic and being somewhat generous on that, where I think many of the leadership here in the UK, especially conservative leadership, had approached Marco Rubio and talked to him about it. He agreed with them that this was a really bad idea, but he was pretty candid in saying that this is not a priority for the president. This is during, when the Middle East was very hot. There was a lot of bigger issues in the world. It wasn't on the top of his list. It finally made it there over the weekend. And there's probably a number of reasons why it was elevated, but, good for the president for finally, kind of turning up on that.
Is he expecting the UK to change course on this? Because it's pretty late in the day, and the government's pretty clear that they don't want to change course.
I know, and I can't predict the outcome, but in this case, but I was just glad to see that the president finally chimed in on it. And that was something that, again, the Secretary of State had tried to push it up the agenda, up to the top of the agenda, and it finally worked.
Greg, good to see you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you both. Good to see you.
Looking forward to the President's speech, of course, later today in Davos.
Now, it's been almost 2 weeks since security forces in Iran opened fire on their own people in cities across the country, and it's been difficult to get information out. The internet's been shut down for 13 days.
But we're still obtaining new footage and various different stories coming from that. And our international correspondent, John Sparks, has been taking a look at one of them A 17-year-old boy killed in the crackdown and his family's attempt to retrieve his body. A warning, this report contains images viewers might find distressing.
A budding performer takes to the mic, fueled by determination and a dream of something big. His name, Abulfazla Yagmouri. A kid from a working-class neighborhood near Tehran, his world is a place where rap is banned. So he pursued it here, a homemade studio built in his closet. Life was hard, the obstacles formidable, but his yearning for change would prove fatal.
They shoot one of them in the heart, and he fell on the ground, and he was bleeding for 40 minutes. They didn't allow the crowd to come and help him. They didn't allow the neighbor and the people to come and help him, to just take him to the hospital, right? They didn't allow that.
Abulfazla's family didn't want him to attend the protests on January the 8th, the night the regime opened fire on its own people. These images have only just emerged. Abulfazla's aunt, Gita, said the family began to look for the 17-year-old in the early hours.
They tried to call him, they tried to go to police station, detention centers, they tried to go to hospitals, any clinic around, but they weren't able to find him.
The boy's brother approached a vehicle that belonged to the morgue. The crew were picking up bodies in the street.
They told him, we have 3 kids inside the morgue vehicle. 2 of them, they do have their family. We know the names, but one of them is anonymous with no name. And he opened the body bag, and it was the face of his brother, and they find him that night.
Neighbors told the family that they watched the young man die.
They were trying to hit him with anything that they had in their hand, with the boots, with the butt of their gun, with everything, while he was bleeding for 40 minutes, and he was gasping for life, right? And then he passed away.
His body was taken here, a facility south of Tehran, where families gather to identify their loved ones. These images recently uploaded to the internet. What happened when Abulfazla's parents got to the morgue to retrieve the body?
They told him, we cannot release the body to you. You have to sign that this kid was part of our army. It was part of IRGC.
The Revolutionary Guards.
Exactly. Otherwise, we are not going to give the body to you.
So Abulfazla's parents were told to sign a document saying their son was serving in the regime's forces when he was killed by protesters.
They didn't agree to sign that, so they asked for money, and then they released the kid.
Is this the so-called bullet tax, the bullet money?
This is what they are talking about, yes.
The allegation here, the family had to pay the authorities for the bullets used to kill their son. That's difficult. The morgue now plays host to these cruel conflicts between victims' families and members of the state. And we see one played out here. A woman warning an employee that people will kill themselves if the bodies aren't released. These premises are steeped in grief. The woman trying to console all those around her. 17-year-old Abulfazla has left a musical legacy online. But his aunt, who lives in Canada, is left with a sense of powerlessness.
I have everything, but I'm not enjoying it because my people, they don't have it. It's very hard.
A popular rebellion has been crushed by the regime, but the people will never be the same. John Sparks, Sky News.
And more from John and the team on the situation in Iran on the Sky News website. Time for a look at the weather.
I hope we haven't forgotten anything.
Travel insurance, I tick that box.
Yeah, but remember what you forgot last year.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News weather.
It'll be mild and unsettled this week, turning colder over the weekend. It'll be windy through the rush hour with prolonged... Excuse me. With prolonged rain and some mountains... Excuse me. Excuse me. Some snow over Scotland. In between, most places look fine, bar the odd mainly coastal shower. Eastern Scotland will see rain and hill snow clearing over the far north by midday, leaving the northern parts looking fine. Central England, meanwhile, will see rain spreading from the southwest.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News weather.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to.
Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome. Westminster, the heart of British politics. I'm so sorry about what happened to you. So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think? It's really unusual. Mornings with Ridge and Frost. Let's crack on. Let's get started.
Welcome back. All eyes on Davos today, where Donald Trump will be making a speech at the World Economic Forum being held there. It was due early this afternoon. It's slightly delayed because of a later than expected departure for him from DC.
And look, the backdrop is these rising tensions between the US and Europe over his repeated threats to take control of Greenland. He's also, of course, taken aim at the UK over the decision over the Chagos Islands. So lots to get to and discuss.
Well, Elizabeth Braw joins us. She's the author and senior fellow at the Atlantic Council think tank. Joins us from Washington, DC. Very early there. Very good morning to you. Thanks for getting up and joining us. Is this a speech that President Trump, you think, is making off the cuff a little bit, going with the flow, or do you think a lot of the outbursts of the last couple of weeks have been strategically planned ahead of this?
Well, he will have a written speech for sure, but he has a tendency to go off script. So lots of world leaders, political leaders and business leaders will be nervous sitting there in the room in Davos. When it comes to his outbursts of the last few weeks, he does seem to improvise because it doesn't follow a logical sequence, but that's almost irrelevant because the outcome is the same: nervousness, anxiety, and real fear around the world, and not just among political leaders and ordinary people, but also in the business community. We have seen the reaction on the US stock markets in the past few days. Investors are concerned.
When you talk to the UK government over here about Donald Trump, they always say, oh, you shouldn't take everything he says seriously. Let's wait and see what happens. But I'll be honest, my experience is we should take Donald Trump quite seriously, because often when he says something, even though at the beginning no one can really quite believe it, he then does go on and do it.
He does. And I think this is the brutal realization since he returned to the White House. In the first Trump administration, that was definitely the case. It was the perceived wisdom that he will say things and then don't take him literally, don't take each outburst seriously because it won't happen. Well, this time in this administration, it's likely to happen, and that is not just a conclusion drawn by foreign governments. It is what somebody like Marco Rubio, his own Secretary of State, says. It says when President Trump says something, he will do it. Well, that is a new day, which also explains why European leaders from the European Union and the UK have reacted so strongly to Trump's most recent statements.
What is your assessment of the position, the evolving position of Mark Carney in Canada, both his recent change in tack to China and his speech yesterday?
It was a remarkable speech, and I think it's a speech that many of us around the world will keep referring to for years to come, because it really was a fork in the road, a milestone, whatever you want to call it, a pivotal moment when a global leader articulated how the world is changing and how we are leaving the so-called rules-based international order behind, how we are entering turbulence, an era of turbulence. And it was interesting that it was Mark Carney who would articulate those thoughts, those realities, I should say. He's as we all know, a former central banker, a bit of a technocrat, not known to be a philosophically minded man, but he articulated in that one speech the enormous changes taking place, and the fact that countries like Canada, like the UK, like the countries in the European Union are vulnerable, but they have something that the other countries don't have. They have the solidarity within their group of law-abiding countries.
To hear your thoughts on this. Certainly going to be a bumpy couple of hours ahead as we wait for that Donald Trump speech. Thank you.
Now, we teased this earlier in the programme, this spat that has been a Twitter spat, an X-spat so far between Elon Musk and Michael O'Leary. He's holding, this is the Ryanair boss.
Oh, my goodness.
He's holding a press conference starting any minute. He's there early. He does love a bit of fantastic.
If you see the screen, big idiot sale. I mean, if you're... apologies for all the promotion for Ryanair, I should say, but this meets the bar, because these are two of the, I think it's fair to say, biggest egos in the world who are going at it. You can see there the kind of big idiots he's got behind it. And this is Michael O'Leary's response to Elon Musk's threat to take over Ryanair, right?
Yes, to rewind a step before that, this sparked when Ryanair decided not to use Starlink to upgrade their internet offerings on their flights. And then Elon Musk threatened to buy Ryanair, which would cost him north of $34 billion to do so. And install a CEO called Ryan was his joke. So I do think it was a joke. And that's then led to them trading barbs about who knows various aviation technology better than the other. Let's have a little listen. Is he starting his press conference?
We are really concerned that given the complaint made by Airlines for America to the US administration, that the White House will, or there's a real risk that the White House will block Aer Lingus flights landing in New York. Or worse still, you know, a national catastrophe could befall. They might block Micheál Martin going to the White House in March. So it's time for action, and we want to call, we and the American Airlines are calling on our Taoiseach Micheál Do Nothing Martin to scrap the cap. It is not good enough to say it'll happen at the end of this year or 2 years' time. They had a government programme published in January 2025 that said they would scrap this cap as soon as possible. As soon as possible doesn't mean 15 months later. The NAMA legislation was passed within 24 hours. We don't think this is as urgent, but 13 months is not as soon as possible, and we want the cap abolished by legislation by the end of January, failing that by the end of February. And if it doesn't, then we are calling on the Trump administration to block or cancel Micheál Martin's visit to the White House until the US airlines have a fair shot, or we lift this cap at Dublin Airport. I understand we've been slightly overtaken by some social media controversy with Elon Musk, which we will be happy to address at the end of this meeting, at the end of the briefing. We'll run through this pretty quickly and then get you onto the meat and stuff. So Ryanair is wonderful. We're growing very strongly in Ireland and all over Europe. It rose to 207 million passengers last year. This summer, we're operating from 96 bases.
The big row, never a better opportunity for a bit of a kind of PR moment from Michael O'Leary, as we saw there.
But on the other side of this break, more build-up to the bigger row and Donald Trump's arrival in Switzerland in a few hours.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist.
A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan has the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?